I call this meeting of the work session of the Hillsboro School Board to order. Our first order of business is the strategic plan consultant selection process with Beth, and Director Lopez may have something to offer as well, as she was part of that process.
Yes, thank you. Hopefully we are working on getting our consultants up on the screen here. As you know, we went through a request for proposals process in early August, and we had 6 consultants that were responsive to the bid process, and we interviewed 2 of those and ultimately selected Performance Fact, and we're thrilled to have them on board. We feel like they not only will bring a lot to the table, but offer us a lot of opportunities to learn from them and their professional communities that they pull together over the course of our work. And as you'll see in their presentation, so much of their frameworks for how they approach equity and just the structures that guide their work are in alignment with our continuous improvement plan and other structures that we currently employ. So without further ado, I would like to hand it over to Lauren. Lauren, can you hear us?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Fabulous.
Hello,
so
everyone.
I will just let you introduce your team and then go through your presentation.
Great. Well, I'm going to turn it over to Mutio Fagbai, who is our President and CEO of Performance Fact. Mutio?
That's great. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me so far?
Yes.
Yes, you can. It's nice to meet you all. Sorry I couldn't attend the interview session last week. I had a personal matter to take care of. I want to begin by, thanking you for your trust. You've chosen someone you haven't worked with before, which means you're doing that partly on trust. And we want to let you know that's something we take very, very seriously. And we're looking forward to working with you and your stakeholders. Lauren is going to do most of the presenting. I want to take a few minutes, maybe just to tell you about the company, our approach, our philosophy, and then I'll pass it back to Lauren. We formed the company in 1997. I used to live on the East Coast back then, started having clients in California, including the state, working on strategic planning for them. So we relocated from the East Coast to what I call the right coast. Initially in Sacramento. Now we've been in Oakland since 2003. So we're a California-based firm, but most of our work is actually outside of the state. More than half of our work is in Washington State. It's been for the past 5-6 years. We've done a lot of work in Pennsylvania. The only client we've ever had in Oregon was PPS, Portland Public Schools, more than a decade ago. In the past 20 plus years, we've worked with more than 100 school districts. And the starting point for almost all the work we do with clients is strategic planning, which we describe as really aligning all stakeholders on common purpose. On this slide on the screen, you see our definition of a facilitator. We see our role as that of a guide. A guide does not command or control, but because this is something, what we do is something that's personally important to us, we do have a point of view also, and that will come out. It's all part of our guiding and providing input. But at every single point, it is the client, in this case, your district, that makes the final decisions. We working with an attitude that once you engage us, you've invited us to be a member of your family with all the rights and responsibilities that come with that. So we're really looking forward to the next few months to work with you on the planning phase. And if the relationship goes well and you choose to have us assist you on the implementation of your plan, that's something we'd like to talk to you about also. Besides Lauren, there are 2 other colleagues, 2 other team members on the on this meeting. Jay Kay is our executive specialist, and Amrit is our director of client relations and project management. So that's a team of 4 that will likely be working with you over the next few months. Unless there are any quick questions for me, like where my accent is from. Accent is from Nigeria, long time ago. Any quick questions for me before I pass it over to Lauren, please?
No, thank you.
Okay, Thank you. It's nice to meet you all.
Great. It's my turn. So we're super excited to be having this opportunity to work with Hillsboro. Just a brief bit about me. I started my career in education in 1999 when I drove a U-Haul out of Portland, Oregon, and pulled into northern New Mexico. Started teaching without a credential or a clue, and sort of fumbled my way through and learned very quickly in my experience that I was really good at creating relationships with the young people who were in my care and in my trust, but what they really needed was an exceptional teacher who could teach them how to read and how to think independently and further their education. And so that led me back to California, where I got my master's degree in education. And I've been working in education for the last 20 some odd years. Most recently, before joining Performance Fact, as a chief academic officer of some school networks in the Bay Area. But I am a Reedy and a graduate from 99, and I'm excited to have the opportunity to come back to the community and swap stories. So if you can go ahead and advance the slide. We just wanted to share a little bit about who we are and what we believe and why we're in this work. We call this our premise, and our premise is that all students, each and every single student will learn at high levels when instruction meets their needs. And part of that premise is to accept that if a student has learned something, we believe they've been taught well. And so the corollary is if they have not yet learned something well, then they have not yet been taught well. And so in effect, what we're thinking about as student learning is the effect, right? It's the effect, and the cause of that effect are the practices and the quality of our teaching and our educational practices, whether it's teaching, leadership, or organizational practices. And so that's where we stand. There's nothing wrong with the kids. It's the adults' work to figure out how we can continue to improve what we do so that the young people in our care can excel. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. Mutia spoke about this, but the primary aim of our work together is around alignment. Right? That's the primary purpose of planning. And misalignment isn't bad. It happens all the time in a variety of ways to our cars, to our organizations, to our bodies. We might go to the chiropractor so that we can get an adjustment to be working optimally. And so that's what the planning process does. And that's what we support our organizations in achieving, is that we're getting the people, the programs, the structures on the same page, moving in the same direction so that you can have the maximum impact on students. You can go ahead to the next slide. And when we kick off our process, and we'll talk briefly about kind of the stages that we'll go through in the process. A core principle is that we want to ensure that every stakeholder group has a voice, and their perspectives has a voice that's listened to and heard as part of the process and centered, and that their perspectives are valued equally in terms of how we go through our planning process. And the one exception to that is that we put one group first and as the primary group that we focus in on, and that's our students. We start with them on purpose. We want to center the experiences of students, and we want to center their voices. And so when we kick off our planning process, we always begin with the kids. We start with a robust student survey, and we also do student focus groups and listening tours with students so that we can gather their perspectives on what's working and what needs improvement in terms of their experience out in the world in Hillsboro. And so when we go through our process, all of these folks, and there might be some other groups in here that aren't named, but that are specific and important in your community, and we'll be working together to ensure that all of those stakeholder groups are meaningfully engaged in the process. And by doing this, not only do we have the best possible plan developed over the course of the term that we're engaged, but we also, by involving folks in the planning, we are ensuring and supporting their commitment to the implementation of the plan, which is actually the hardest part. You can go ahead and move forward. So we'll have a number of different stakeholder groups, but the core of the group is what we call our core planning team. And that core planning team will include representation of every stakeholder group that is important to the community. And so this team really works together to shepherd the whole process through. And so they're the ones who will be analyzing, digging in, rolling up the sleeves, analyzing the student data, looking at the student voice surveys and responses, and coming to draw conclusions around what are the key areas of needs, the strengths that are already in place that we want to build on, and they'll be the first folks to be recommending what the goals should be within the strategic plan. And they are the ones who really are pulling all the pieces together. And so then that team can be anywhere from 20 to 150 or more, people who gather together through the process. I'll take the next slide. And then in addition, we have several other groups that we engage. We'll have a student voice team that I've already mentioned. We'll also have an instructional focus team where we pull together the teachers, instructional aides, instructional leaders across the district to be focusing in and doing a deep dive to analyze the quality and the efficacy of the instructional practices that are in place and to make recommendations around which instructional practices are the ones that we want to get really good at to support the goals and outcomes of the new plan. We'll also have administrator teams and board team reviews and community forums in a variety of ways throughout the time that we engage all stakeholders. We'll take the next slide. So this is just briefly the process we're going into. We're kind of in phase one right now, getting everybody ready to go. So understanding what the process is going to be and mobilizing the community. Then we move into our phase of gathering an assessment of what the current state is. And then we kind of proceed through all of these questions until we come to the final phase of the plan. You can go to the next slide. I'm skipping a couple of them because I know you want to leave time for questions. But what we'll end up with, right, is that we will have this strategic plan that will be grounded in 3 areas. And we start, again, even the plan itself starts with the students. So within the student learning, we will define what our equity principles are, work on a portrait of a graduate, revisit mission, vision, core values. You'll have goals and measure, and look at the targets and benchmarks for achieving those goals. Once we've established that, then we can move on to the next layer, and we intentionally put instruction as the central next piece. It is the second piece to look at, given our premise. And so then we focus in on instructional effectiveness and just instruction. So we'll name what our building blocks of our instructional program are. We'll look at professional practices and educational strategies that will get to the ends of student learning. And it's only after all that's done that we'll start talking about all of the infrastructure and supports necessary to support instruction, whether that's looking at operations or human resources. So you'll see in our plans, our goals are always centered on student learning. And because that's where we know that that's the ends that all of us are aligned and focused on. The last piece that I'll touch on and then take some questions, you can go to the next slide. Is what we, how we think about equity and in our organization. And so we shared during our interview is that one of the places that we turn to guide our framework is looking at the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. And their research paper that they put out monitoring educational equity. And so when we talk about equity, what we're talking about is how we are ensuring that both access and outcomes for, we tend to both access and outcomes for young people. But the key principle with equity versus equality is that when we're working with equity, we need to be thinking about, in some ways, we have to consider how to be purposefully unequal. Where do we put our resources, right? So that we're supporting the students and the programs that need it the most. And we'll take one more slide. And so when we think about our equity imperative as an organization, what we talk about is ensuring that there's equitable access to resources and opportunities so that we can have equal outcomes for every student without exception. And that's the focus that grounds us. And I can go into, I shared another document. We don't need to pull it up now, but as a resource to talk a little bit more about those, the indicators and measures around equity. But I will leave it there for questions. Thank you.
I guess I can't see the room specifically, but if you can get a microphone and call on whoever has the questions.
We're going to go to Seth Tronco, who has her hand up.
All right, are we sure this is still working? It looks like the screen is lighting up, so I'm going to take that as a yes.
We can hear you.
Curious, you were talking about in your terms of the groups that you were hoping to engage in the planning group. You were talking about a core planning group, but also separately a student voice team. Do you anticipate a student voice team as being the only place that students would be actively engaged? Or do you also see a place for students to be part of the core planning team if you're hoping to engage all stakeholders?
Yes, students are definitely on the core planning team. However, we won't be able to have every student voice lifted on the core planning team. We would have, a number of students there. And so the student voice session is where we work to lift up the voices of the student body and the student population. But the students are also part of this, the core planning team.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Erica, I wonder if you wanted to share anything because you were part of the evaluation team that interviewed our consultants.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. It's really nice to meet you by your virtual environment. I just wanted to say that it was a great interview process that we did, and we were really, I think we felt like kindred spirits where our district is and where this consultant firm is, and really that they understand our mission and our value system, and also the importance of centering around student voices. And that's really what the approach that you presented was really what resonated with me as a board member. And so I'm really excited that you guys are presenting tonight and that we're able to hear the approach. And to all my fellow board members, I think that this is going to be an exciting project for us in the next, year or two to kick this off and really leave a plan in place for our community. So I'm really excited for all of you to join us tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other hands in the room?
First, for the equity centered strategic planning. So what exactly is a portrait of a graduate and the 4 pillars?
Great. So the portrait of a graduate, and I can't pull things up, I don't think, to share, but a portrait of a graduate is where you are articulating the vision, your highest hopes for all of the graduates from Hillsboro. Like, what are we aiming for in terms of the characteristics, the skills, and kind of dispositions that that all of our programs are working towards. And so a portrait is not necessarily about what is our 5-year goals in terms of where we're trying to get for a particular student achievement metric, but rather things like you might say globally conscious citizen, or a critical and creative thinker. Those are just, some phrases that different folks who have created portraits have come up with, but we go through a process to it's really a design process with the community to envision what this portrait will be and how it will guide kind of the work of the district. And it's a K-12 portrait. It's really looking at how are we really envisioning how we're supporting and developing our young people. Oh, and the pillars. Yes. Sorry. And the 4, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Board Vice Chair Thomas had her hand up.
First of all, thank you to the consultants and thank you for being willing to engage with us in this long journey. One of the things that I appreciate the brevity of your presentation. However, I didn't get a sense of the timing and the time frame. I have no doubt that you have many, many slides that you could roll out on milestones and that type of thing. And I wasn't looking so far as milestones as much as I was looking for a time frame of start to finish, that type of idea. And thank you again for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can share part of the RFP. We included a mock calendar to take a look at the process. And my teammates correct me if I'm wrong if I get this, but typically, we'll see an engagement that would be, half a year would probably be what I would say. It depends on when you're starting and when you need to finish by. I would say sometimes their engagements have been longer and sometimes they've been, more condensed. But it's typically over several, many months.
Yeah. Typically, if you were to start, and the goal is always to finish in one school year, so that you can begin to implement the next school year. So if we were to start in November, we'll be done by May, early June at the latest, so that you can actually start implementing your plan the next school year. Between 4 and 7 months, a 7-month process is a very, very long one. Typically be 4 to 5 months for most of them.
And just to remind our board and our guests, we had outlined a process that would basically start pretty immediately. We have our organizational meeting next Friday and hoping to really hit the ground running so that we can have a plan ready to go by March, which will enable us to ensure that as we go through budgeting for next year, we can align our budgeting priorities to the strategic plan priorities. So for us, it'll be hopefully wrapping in March.
Yeah.
Were there other comments or questions from the board?
For the 4 pillars, like, could I get some clarification of what exactly that is?
Yes, thank you for coming back to that. So when we think about the 4 pillars, what we're talking about are what are the foundations that the district is using as like to stand on in terms of the direction of the organization, and it unifies. It's sort of like their grounding of those things. And so we talk about them in 4 areas. One is around teaching and learning. So what are the foundational pillars around teaching and learning that are going to guide, right, us in our thinking about the practices and the strategies that we'd use? We talk about schools can't do it alone, and as another pillar. And that pillar is around how are we really engaging and connecting to the community at large as a partner, as well as someone who we're supporting and developing the young people in the community. We also talk about the 3rd pillar, which is investing in people. So how are we actually developing the capacity of the folks in our organization to be able to deliver on our goals for our young people. And then the 4th pillar is around managing the whole. It's really thinking about alignment. How are we bringing all of the pieces together so that we can ensure that we're all moving in the same direction? And so through the process, after we have our goals, so we're clear on what our ends are, where we're headed, then we talk really about like what is going to be the foundation that we're going to build this strategic plan on. And the idea with a foundation is that it's not something that if you're building a house, you don't, and when you go to remodel, you don't really tear up your foundation every 10 years. Like your foundation is something that's solid. And you might make a few adjustments or need to add something if you're, expanding your house. But really, we're looking at what are the core principles that are going to undergird the organization. And that's what we mean by the 4 pillars.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else?
Looks like we're good,
All right.
Mark.
Thank you all for joining us today, and appreciate you being part of our team. And Moody, to your point about being family now, I will be homeless when I get back. So, family usually helps put somebody up. So just saying.
I would say, well, if you move to the Bay Area, we have extra room.
I know plenty of people in the area if you need a place.
All right. Thank you all.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you all.
Okay, take care.
Appreciate it.
See you soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
throughout the year, we often have, we're able to be fortunate enough to have discussions with our parent advisory groups, and tonight is another example of that. So I believe, Francesca, are you going to lead the conversation with the group? Is that how we had it planned? Find her a microphone. That's our next item, I believe.
I was going to introduce them, and then we were going to move to them having a presentation for the board. So good evening,
Outstanding.
and good evening to Ireland. We have today with us our Latinx PAC group, and if we remember, our parent advisory committees work to help provide advice to the district on different things that pertain to their particular group. So with this group in particular, one of the big celebrations that we have for them was last week. They had their first PAC meeting online virtually. And at one point they had over 260 people sign on to be a part of the conversation. And so the ladies today, and gentlemen, or ladies, the people that are here today are going to share with us some recommendations that they have. And as our advisory committee, their job is vested in our students, their students, our schools, and what we can do to improve communication between the two, but also what we can do better in the schools. So Mariana, I'm going to pass it on to you and Olga so that you can introduce the ladies that are here today.
Es con orgullo que ella presenta a los miembros del PAC. Ella está muy orgullosa que en esta semana pasada ustedes tuvieron su primera reunión virtual del PAC. Entonces, ahorita vamos a pasar el micrófono a la directora Olga para que presente a los papás del PAC.
Good evening, board members. I would love to pass the baton to Dora, who has worked very hard with to coordinate the presentation tonight with our parents, and she has spent several nights with them. And she is our family engagement liaison at the district level, and it's my privilege to allow her to do this piece for us.
Good evening, board members. Thank you so much for inviting the Latino Parent Advisory Committee. And I'm just going to pass the microphone to the members.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Francisca Alonso. Fui nombrada presidenta de PAC por los siguientes 2 años. Creo firmemente en que el involucramiento de los padres es de suma importancia en la educación de nuestros hijos. Agradezco la enorme oportunidad que nos brindan ustedes hoy en este día para hacerles saber nuestras recomendaciones y necesidades, por siempre estar en favor de una educación equitativa a favor de nuestros estudiantes.
I appreciate the enormous opportunity that you offer us today to let you know our recommendations and needs for always being in favor of a better, equitable education for our students.
Somos un gran equipo de padres líderes involucrados en la educación de nuestros hijos. Esta tarde nos acompañan
We are a great team of parent leaders involved in the education of our children. This evening, we are accompanied by
Diana Delgado, miembro del PAC.
Diana Delgado, PAC member.
Guadalupe Sánchez, secretaria del PAC.
Guadalupe Sánchez, PAC secretary.
Marisol Cariño, vicepresidenta de PAC.
Marisol Cariño, vice president of the PAC.
Elizabeth García Romero, vicepresidenta.
Elizabeth García Romero, vice president of the PAC.
Marlene Olea, miembro del PAC.
Marlene Olea, PAC member.
Arely Santos, representante estudiantil de PAC. Asisto a Hillsboro High School.
Arely Santos, PAC student representative. I attend Hillsboro High School.
Buenas tardes, soy Ashley Pineda, estudiante representante de PAC y asisto a la escuela Century.
Good evening. My name is Ashley Pineda. I'm a PAC student representative and I attend Century High School.
Hola, buenas tardes. Compartiré con ustedes el propósito del PAC Latino del distrito.
Hello, good evening. I will share with you the purpose of the PAC of Latino of the district.
Es brindar asesoría y recomendaciones a los administradores y al personal sobre los diferentes programas.
It's providing advice and recommendation to the administration and the staff on the different programs,
así como el involucramiento y la participación de las familias.
such as the involvement and participation of families.
Buenas tardes, yo compartiré con ustedes lo que son las metas del PAC.
Good evening. I will share with you what are the purpose of the PAC. Oh, the goals of the PAC, sorry.
Algunas de las metas que tenemos, como por ejemplo la número 1 es colaboración y participación con los directores y los miembros del personal para promover altos niveles de involucramiento familiar y de los padres.
Our first goal is the collaboration and participation with the principals and the staff to promote high levels of family engagement.
La segunda sería apoyar y brindar a los PAC con capacitación.
The second would be to support and provide workshops to the different PAC.
Y la tercera, pues, es fomentar la colaboración y comunicación con la mesa directiva y pues estamos pidiendo si se puede tener una reunión informal con ustedes.
And the third one would be to encourage collaboration, communication, and participation with the school board. And what we are asking here is to have an informal meeting with all of you.
Buenas tardes. Gracias por la oportunidad que nos dan de brindarles estas recomendaciones.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity you provide for us to give you these recommendations.
Particularmente nos gustaría incrementar la colaboración de PAC con la mesa directiva.
Particularly, we would like to increase the collaboration of PAC with the board of directors.
Así que hacemos una invitación abierta a todos ustedes a nuestra reunión.
So we extend an open invitation to all of you to all of our virtual meetings.
Otra recomendación es ofrecer programas de enriquecimiento académico para los estudiantes.
Another recommendation would be to offer academic support to the students.
Estamos hablando de lecturas y matemáticas.
And we're talking about reading and writing.
Ofrecer talleres a los padres para seguir apoyando a sus niños en casa.
And to offer workshops to parents so that they can continue to support their students at home.
Y nos gustaría ver más colaboración con los maestros para ofrecer materiales.
And we would like to see more collaboration with teachers so that they can provide materials.
Eso significa que los padres deben sentirse confortables colaborar con ellos.
And that signifies that the parents feel comfortable being in a collaboration with them.
Nuestra tercera recomendación sería más tutores bilingües en todas las escuelas.
Our third recommendation would be to have more bilingual tutors in the schools.
Asesoramiento de los maestros a los padres para incrementar el aprendizaje.
Advice from teachers to parents to increase learning.
Cuarta sería más colaboración de los directores con el comité de sus escuelas.
And fourth would be more collaboration from the principals with the committees of their schools.
Nuestra siguiente recomendación sería elaborar material impreso respecto a los protocolos de COVID específicos y claros para las familias.
Our next recommendation is to develop printed materials regarding specific and clear COVID protocols for families.
Así como publicar boletines con actualizaciones periódicas sobre la salud de los estudiantes.
As well as publishing newsletters with regular updates on student health.
Por último, nos gustaría saber cuál es el plan a futuro para el programa de lenguaje dual.
And finally, we would like to know what the future plan is for the dual language program.
Buenas tardes. Algunas de las ideas y expectativas que los estudiantes tenemos para este año escolar son las siguientes. Énfasis en la revisión de prácticas académicas. Para la mayoría de los estudiantes fue un reto adaptarse a los cambios que vivimos el ciclo escolar pasado. Por ello, tener la oportunidad de recibir apoyo académico, así como tener acceso a estrategias de estudios, serían grandes herramientas que los alumnos podrían aprovechar.
Good evening. Some of the ideas and expectations that the students have for this new school year are the following. Emphasis on the review of academic practices. For most of the students, it was a challenge to adapt to the changes we experienced last school year. So having the opportunity to receive academic support, as well as having access to study strategies, would be a great tool that students could take advantage of.
Otra de las recomendaciones que tenemos es brindar apoyo a los alumnos que se están transicionando de prekinder, primaria, secundaria y preparatoria.
Another recommendation that we have would be to provide support to students transitioning to pre-kindergarten, elementary, middle, and high school,
incluyendo alumnos recién llegados y estudiantes que participan en el programa como Early College,
including newcomers and students that participate in early college.
Personalmente sé lo que se siente asistir por primera vez a una nueva escuela que es totalmente distinta a lo que estamos acostumbrados. Por ello creemos que en esta ocasión todos los estudiantes que están ingresando a una nueva institución por primera vez necesitarían más apoyo, más aún después de haber pasado un año distinto a lo que estábamos acostumbrados.
I personally know what it feels like to attend a school that is different from what we are usually used to. For this reason, we consider that at this time, all middle and high school students who are entering for the first time should have more support, especially after having gone through a school year like last year.
Gracias por escuchar nuestras recomendaciones y necesidades que tenemos y los invitamos a que si tienen una pregunta nos las hagan saber.
Thank you for listening to the recommendations and suggestions that we have made and our needs. At this time, we would invite you to ask any questions that you have for us.
Okay, I cannot see in the room, but does anybody have their hands up and would like to pass the microphone to them?
Oh, thanks. I thought based off where you were indicating that you were going to go first. Hi, I was just hoping to ask where us board members could find information for how to attend any of the Latinx Parent Advisory Council meetings. I would be very interested in being able to come to at least a few of them.
Hola, yo quería hacer la pregunta de dónde nosotros, los miembros de la mesa directiva, pudiéramos encontrar información de cómo podemos asistir a sus reuniones virtuales. A mí me gustaría poder asistir a algunos que puedan.
Sí, estamos reuniéndonos y nuestra trabajadora de alcance familiar, Dorotea López, es la que puede brindar más información sobre nuestras reuniones y como dijimos, son bienvenidos.
Dora Lopez, our family and outreach liaison for the district, can give you more information on that.
Sure, we would love to invite you. I can send the calendar invite.
Entonces yo le puedo mandar una invitación a su calendario.
If people like outside of this room, like other people like within, like for example, like Hillsboro, like go and stuff like that, if they want to like attend these meetings, you know, so like become a part of this, like how would they join?
Si otra gente que asiste a otras escuelas, por ejemplo, en Glencoe, como donde asisten los niños, ¿cómo es que ellos serían parte de esta reunión o serían parte de este PAC?
Lo que acaba de decir nuestra directora de comunicación es que esa información es publicada por medio del sistema web en las comunicaciones que se mandan originalmente o frecuentemente a las escuelas.
Okay. So first of all, thank you for the direct, not only figuring out how I thank you for the recommendations that you made. I appreciate not only that you are working to support parents and to support students, but actively providing recommendations on how we can improve the work that we do.
Muchas gracias por sus recomendaciones, por el trabajo que ustedes hacen con los padres y también por informarnos de cómo podemos mejorar el trabajo que nosotros hacemos.
One of the things that I noticed in your recommendations, there were 2 bullets that spoke to academic support or providing additional assistance of some type. Can you be a little more specific? What is it that would be most helpful for you in that academic support area?
Una de las cosas que vi en su presentación, que hay 2 puntos donde ustedes hablan sobre el apoyo académico. ¿Ustedes pudieran ser más específicos sobre qué tipo de ayuda están buscando bajo ese punto de apoyo académico?
Bueno, lo que estamos pidiendo, ¿verdad? En colaboración con los demás padres, es que justamente en cada una de las escuelas ofrezcan clases adicionales para que nuestros estudiantes se vayan nivelando poco a poco. Estamos hablando de lectura y matemática. Sabemos que no en todas las escuelas se ofrece, pero nos gustaría.
So what we're talking about and asking in this question, in these points, is for more support for our students at their school. We know, and we're specifically speaking to reading and write and math. We know that not at all schools do they offer that extra support, but extra support so our students will be at their academic level.
También bueno, también un poquito añadiendo, era sobre tutores que hablan español, principalmente porque durante la pandemia los padres no podían ayudar a sus hijos con las tareas.
We specifically would also like to ask for tutors that are bilingual, speak Spanish, so that they can help our students, because specifically during the pandemic, parents were not able to help their students.
A pesar de que tengo 5 hijos, son nacidos aquí, pero de todas maneras el nivel de inglés todavía a veces no es bueno, especialmente en los chiquitos, y creo que necesitan más apoyo.
I have 5 children, all of them are born here. And even though they are born here, their English could use help.
Como los estudiantes lo dijeron y como todos sabemos, fue un año de grandes retos por lo del COVID y muchos estudiantes se quedaron a un bajo nivel de lo que tenían que estar. Entonces, sabemos que hay tutores, pero quisiéramos que llegara por lo regular a todos los estudiantes que lo necesiten. Entonces, necesitamos que los maestros ofrezcan esas oportunidades que tienen los estudiantes de agarrar tutores para que pueda alcanzar una gran oportunidad para todos los estudiantes.
So due to the pandemic, we know that our students are not at grade level and they've fallen behind, and we would like to have tutors available to all the students that need them, and that teachers know which students need them and can offer them the tutoring.
So I heard bilingual tutors. I also heard additional written materials for home study. Could you tell me more about what that means for you?
Yo escuché tutores bilingües y también materiales por escrito para que ustedes pudieran hacer en la casa con sus estudiantes. ¿Me pueden decir un poquito más qué significa eso para ustedes?
Un ejemplo que quiero dar es, por ejemplo, en una escuela que me impactó mucho, W. Henry, estaban, no todos, pero algunos niños estaban bajos en sus calificaciones en matemáticas. Los padres pidieron talleres para con los maestros. Los maestros orientaban a los padres cómo apoyar a sus niños para que llegaran a ese nivel que deberían de estar. Entonces, poner esos talleres para matemáticas o la lectura, para hacer como tips o destrezas para nosotros los padres y así poder ayudar a nuestros hijos.
So one thing that I would like to share with you is about the school W.L. Henry. I heard that there was a group of parents where their students were behind and in math. So what they did was they asked the teachers for workshops, and the teachers provided workshops with tips and strategies for the parents so that they could help their students at home and so that they could reach the level they were supposed to be at academically.
Algo que también me gustaría es de que yo sé que estamos regresando a la normalidad con los estudiantes poco a poco, ¿verdad? Pero me gustaría que hubiera más clubs de lectura después de escuela, ya sea que pueda ser en línea para los estudiantes. Creo que en la escuela de mi hijo había...
So I know that we're going back to normal little by little with our students. What I would like to see is more reading clubs after school. It could be something that's done virtually.
Creo que es una buena forma de empezar poco a poco que los estudiantes alcancen el nivel que bueno, sabemos que en el año pasado todos los estudiantes, la mayoría de los estudiantes se quedó así, no hubo avance, ¿verdad? Pero sí me gustaría eso, que hubiera más clubs y que los estudiantes pudieran tener acceso a más libros para llevar a casa también.
So we know that most students last year didn't have any growth. They kind of stayed where they were. And so I would like to see more clubs offered like this, and also that the students have more access to books that they can take home and read.
I have a question, and buenas tardes, buenas noches a todos. Gracias por estar aquí con nosotros. So thank you, good evening everyone, thank you for joining us tonight. So una de las preguntas que tenía, tengo tres preguntas. La primera es con la colaboración de los directores del comité con más reuniones, creo que con los principals de las escuelas. Entonces quería preguntar cómo se ve ahorita la interacción que tienen con los directores de las escuelas y si de alguna forma colaboran o se reúnen para planificar durante el año quizás talleres o eventos que el PAC tiene, o eso es lo que están exactamente pidiendo, que tuvieran un poquito más de coordinación y colaboración con los directores de las escuelas. So my question was that with one of the recommendations around more collaboration with the principals and the committee, that what is the current state of the relationship right now with the principals, and are they meeting the plan like for the year, what kind of workshops or engagement activities the PACs are going to be doing, or is that what they're asking for?
Bueno, pues yo soy la vicepresidenta de McKinney, del PAC de McKinney, y yo puedo decir que antes de la pandemia ya teníamos con el Mr. Welch, que era el director anterior, y con la nueva directora, y teníamos buena relación, ¿verdad? Ahorita con la pandemia, pues todo eso paró, pero estamos recibiendo información continuamente de ella. Y como dije hace rato, pues es regresar a la normalidad poco a poco, pero no queremos dejar las reuniones con los directores.
So I am actually the vice president for the McKinney PAC. And I can say that before COVID, with Mr. Welch, who was the previous principal, and the new principal that's there now, we have had good communication with them. And, since COVID, we are getting information out to us.
Una de nuestras metas también es justamente tener esa colaboración de los directores con esa mente abierta, ¿verdad? Para que nos den la oportunidad de colaborar.
So one of the points with the collaboration is that the principals come with an open mind so that they can come and collaborate with us.
Algunas escuelas no tienen comités de PACs, sin embargo, habemos padres que deseamos colaborar. Entonces, quizás hay alguna manera de que ellos nos den esa oportunidad de poder participar cuando se viene preparando para el siguiente ciclo escolar, por ejemplo.
There are some schools that do not have PACs, but they do have parents that want to participate and help with the planning. And maybe they would be open to the idea of us helping, maybe planning the next school year.
Como lo dijeron mis compañeras, hay algunos directores que ya están colaborando con el grupo de padres, pero se necesita más. Necesitamos que más directores se involucren con los padres, porque una de nuestras metas es eso. Pero ¿cómo vamos a cumplir nuestra meta si ellos no nos escuchan? Necesitamos que los directores escuchen nuestras recomendaciones y necesidades que tenemos nosotros los padres, a lo que nos hacen saber nuestros estudiantes.
So as my partners here have said, There are some principals that are collaborating with us, but we need all of the principals to collaborate with us, to listen to us. One of our goals is to collaborate with them. How can we reach our goal if they are not helping us? You know, we as parents are in this for our children.
Gracias. Otra pregunta que quería preguntar es acerca de la recomendación primera acerca de tener una junta con la mesa directiva que somos nosotros, que sea un poquito más informal. Y siento que esa es una área donde otros PACs que apenas se están formando también están también interesados de saber cómo funciona poder interactuar con nosotros y hacer algo un poquito menos formal. ¿Estarían abiertos si pudiéramos organizar o darle una recomendación a nuestro superintendente de organizar un evento o actividad donde podamos reunirnos con los líderes de diferentes otros PACs y nosotros también, de una forma también más informal para conocerlos un poquito mejor? And my question was that we have other PACs that are newly formed or that have been forming over the last year. And so I think that the first recommendation about that touches on the PACs having more informal meeting with the board of directors, that if they would be open to also include the other PACs leadership so that we could have maybe one event that we might to organize for us and we all kind of come together in a more informal way and get to know each other a little bit better and basic. Y la última cosa para ya rendirle el micrófono es, como vieron la presentación que apenas tuvimos, acabamos de agarrar una organización, o contratar con unas personas que nos van a ayudar a planificar el plan estratégico para el distrito escolar de Hillsboro. ¿Cómo se ve nuestro plan en el futuro? ¿Qué es lo que queremos para los estudiantes? Y entonces quisiera nada más abrirles unas invitaciones que en cuanto vean estas oportunidades que van a estar trayendo estas personas de pedirles información o opinión, que por favor participen y que por favor diseman la información con otros padres también. And so the last thing was I was just asking them that our first presenters that we had are consultants or around strategic planning, and that when they come around to ask for information, that they share those opportunities and that they also let us know their feedback.
The last comment I have, you mentioned the future plans of the dual language program. Very important to our community. It is very important to me and part of what I ran on, and I would like to see the district to understand what we have done in the past, if there's been an audit, how many we graduated, the whole 9 yards of the program, and then to understand what the strategic plan is for the dual language program in the future. It's a good question, and I want to know as well. So I commit to make sure that we continue to look at it and report back to you.
Su pregunta sobre cuál es el futuro del plan bilingüe del distrito escolar es una muy buena, es algo que yo también tengo como algo que es importante para mí. Yo quiero que el distrito haga un auditorio del programa para ver cuántos se han graduado y cómo está el programa, para ver cómo podemos ayudarlo en nuestro plan estratégica. Y yo me comprometo con ustedes que esto va a ser una de las cosas en las que yo voy a trabajar para todos.
Gracias por su atención. Solamente un pequeño comentario. Tuvimos junta con 2 directores de 2 escuelas, y no recuerdo cuál, y nos gustaría también, una de nuestras recomendaciones era tener juntas con más directores en general, ¿verdad? De todos, para poder colaborar con nosotros y escuchar nuestras necesidades como PAC.
One last comment that I want to make is we did meet with 2 principals in the district. I don't remember exactly who they were, but one of our recommendations is that we want to work with more principals. We'd like to have those type of meetings with more principals so that they can hear our needs and collaborate with us.
So I was looking for the recommendations from like the PAC student representative. Like I really I like and agree with the goals, like finding ways to support transitioning students and newcomers. I was just wondering if you guys have any like specific ideas or goals that you guys want to share.
En la recomendación de los estudiantes me gustó mucho sobre apoyar a los estudiantes que están haciendo la transición. Entonces, quería saber si ustedes tienen más recomendaciones o cosas que ustedes quieren para poder hacer eso.
Sí, referente a ese punto, estábamos pensando, oh, referente a ese punto, estábamos pensando como formas para que ayudaran a los alumnos que se estaban transicionando para que se adaptaran con mayor facilidad a la escuela, ya que, pues, obviamente cuando se transicionan a otro nivel o a otra escuela es como el nivel académico es más difícil y después de haber pasado por estar estudiando en línea, siento que para los estudiantes va a ser mucho más difícil como volver a adaptarse, no solamente como a regresar otra vez en persona a la escuela, sino también a un nivel académico más riguroso.
So when we were talking about this point, we were thinking about how you could give support to the students. So as they're transitioning into the next grade level, especially because we're coming from a year of being at home, studying at home. So they're now going into a different grade level, possibly a different school. And it's going to be a little bit more rigorous work than being at home and doing it there. So giving them support as they transition into the next grade level.
Yo puedo dar una idea como mamá, ¿verdad? Porque mi hija transicionó a otra escuela. Quizás para los estudiantes dar un día con una breve orientación, ya sea para middle school o high school, que funciona más para ellos, y darles esa confianza, esa seguridad a los estudiantes de que van a estar bien, ¿verdad? Quizás que lo hagan otros estudiantes con un consejero, ¿verdad? Y para los padres también es importante que hagan esa transición, quizás no en el mismo día, quizás a través de una carta, ¿verdad? También puede ser otra idea.
As a mom, I can make a recommendation. Since my daughter transitioned to a different school, it would be good if there was a time for the students, a certain day where they can go in and they can see the school, they can get familiar with it, where they feel confident and secure in the school, they can meet the counselor, and also offer that same thing to the parents, maybe on a different day or maybe through a letter home to the parents.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Any more más preguntas? Any more questions? All right. Thank you for being with us tonight. Gracias. Our next agenda item, what should we give you? Do you guys want, are you guys gonna hang out at the table? Or does everybody wanna? Cool, we're good. Our next agenda item is the fall update, and I believe Mike and Travis kicked that off, and we probably have a presentation.
Yep, a number of us are going to speak this evening. I'm going to kick it off, and then we're going to turn it to Dale. So first of all, I think one of the things that we just want to communicate to the board is just how thankful we are to have the opportunity to have kids back all day, every day. That has been a goal of ours for the last 19 months or so, and we're just now to the spot where we have students all day. We have them every day. It's required a ton of problem solving, some of which you're going to hear about this evening. And we also know that we are going to have the opportunity to do a ton of problem solving as we move forward throughout this year. There continue to be issues that we're going to continue to work on, but we just want to give you an update of where we are currently, some of the mitigation strategies that we've already engaged in, as well as where what we're working on next. So Dale, you want to take the next?
Better?
There we go. All right. So this is our agenda for this evening. Next slide, please. Let's try microphone 3. There we go. All right. And really what Mike said, it definitely was a start of problem solving, because we were definitely trying to figure out, can families come into the buildings? We have lots of great new spaces. Can we have parent evenings? Can we have people in? Can't we? All of those sorts of things. So there's a lot of problem solving. We still managed to figure out ways to do some traditional things like pictures with families, outside doors, greeting kids, helping them get to know their new facilities. Next slide. Also with the problem solving involved safety protocols such as social distancing. So a lot of markers on floors, trying to maintain at least that 3 feet. I have to admit, we agreed that we would talk about some of the great things, but also there continue to be challenges. Students love each other. Yes, they do. And so really like back up. It's really hard. Not all of us have that cognition around what is 3 feet. So we're continuing to try to use markers. I think this is an especially large challenge at the high school and middle school areas, just because we have so many kids and we're happy that they're there. But trying to follow that less than 15-minute distancing in spaces and hallways and such, and just keep kids going, but they're so excited to be together. So it's great. The new gyms have been amazing. Thank you, Bond, that was able to provide for those gyms. We use them in a variety of ways, including an additional space for eating in some situations. Also allows for kids to walk around and get active prior to going into classrooms in some places where they had the cafegimatoriums and that wasn't possible before. Next slide. So it's a picture of high school. And those of you who knew, listen, in the spring, we had quite a few students that just were really challenged, whether they had to go to work or online learning was difficult, but we have more students than ever that are off track. So we're really excited that they came back to us and they're getting engaged in hands-on activities. A lot of interest. If you check out our CTE program, some of those art classes, all those high interest things, there's just a buzz definitely at the school, which has been amazing. We are also continuing with our advisory program at the middle and high school through feedback both from teachers and students and parents that we got in the spring. We've altered it a little bit. We're going to 3 days a week and really focusing on the social emotional learning, the building of connections. The 2 days that were provided for us in order to reach out to our families enabled us to have those initial conversations. At the elementary school, we continue to work with morning meetings, and wellness instructors are pushing in to do lessons about regulation. Thankful for Fran's leadership in that area that has helped us better streamline our services more consistently across our district and bring in that lens of culturally responsive practices and equity. Next slide. So we continue to just get to know our students and figure out what their names are, getting them opportunities to reconnect. I can tell you there's a little bit of a weirdness going on where kids are just trying to figure out how to interact again. So teachers are really pushing to do some of those get up, walk around the room, posters, pair share talks, trying to get that going because they're all trying to figure out how to make new friends. You know, if you think about like at the middle school, those students that are sitting in 7th and 8th grade, you have one group that was there about 10 weeks every other day. So for all intents and purposes, it's a brand new group of kids. Same thing at the high school level, right? Our seniors had a full year as freshmen, interrupted sophomore year, no, not really there a whole lot their junior year. So there's a lot of challenges of getting to know each other, but it's awesome. We're figuring that out. I know there were comments about not having the ability to come. Typically in our district, we have freshmen come for one day all by themselves, which is a great thing. Based on the data that we got last year, we decided that we would take those 2 days and really interact with our families and get to know students more on a personal level. We thought that that was really important as they transition back. We would have liked to have had a whole day for freshmen, a whole day for sophomores, but our kids would have been out 4 days. And so we decided through advisory that we would try to build those connections, get to know kids and the building in a different way. I can say I was out in high schools and there were lots of great questions. People were feeling really comfortable asking where their rooms were. We had targeted students. If you go to the next slide, targeted students who were just around, some of them had balloons. So that students knew like, these are people that I can ask in addition to lots of adults out in the building. Middle school students spend about half their day in advisory on the first day, learning about their school, lockers, tour of the building, etc. We continue to work really, really hard for hiring. I think Connor will probably mention that at some point. We've done a lot of hiring. And so there's a lot of helping our staff get to know our students too. So we're just taking it slow. We've called out September's a time to re-engage with each other and build those relationships, which is exciting. Last slide, lunch. We have free lunch to all students. Yes, it's awesome, wonderful, wonderful. Breakfast as well, which poses a problem, a challenge, not a problem, in terms of getting kids through the lines, making sure that they have space for social distancing. We're bringing in more tables in certain areas, trying to move tables out. So that's kind of been a little bit of a challenge that we're working through on a daily basis. It gets better every day. And also some unique challenges. We have more parents than ever dropping off and picking up students at the elementary level, which is also wonderful, but lots of long lines in the drop off and the pickups. So all things we're just kind of working out. But again, we have kids back. So we're just excited. And those are things that we are happily working through and problem solving.
Yay. Thanks, Dale. Good evening, everyone. Good to see you all. And just wanted to give you a brief update on negotiations. In April, we sent a letter to both of our unions to let them know that we were going to be using the framework, which is now the resiliency framework, and the Oregon Health Authority, Washington County Health Guidance in terms of what we were going to do so we can maintain up-to-date responsive protocols to put in place to start the year. And so that's been kind of the anchoring of our work together as we move through negotiations. And we're making good progress. And there's a lot of details that can't be shared in full detail until we've completed. And we're very close to finishing. And just want to thank our conversations that we have with both the classified and licensed unions in regards to our memorandum agreements and understandings. Most of our conversations and focuses of negotiation have centered on working conditions and health and safety. And we are also going to continue successor bargaining this fall and work through both agreements. And you'll start to see monthly updates through information about the successor bargaining. And want to thank Erica and Mark for participating on our negotiations for successor bargaining. All right, we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. So Michelle and possibly Jordan, because I see that he's online, we're going to talk through the staff vaccination update. And so with the three major aspects of the work that are at hand, we're trying to develop a system and a structure that allows us to track the proof of vaccination, and those that are granted medical and religious exceptions. We want to have everything in one place. One of the things that we have learned is it takes time to create processes and systems to make sure that they're streamlined. One of my HR colleagues, Saida Hagigi, says it's best to measure once and cut twice, measure twice and cut once. Just seeing if you were listening. We have been working collaboratively with tech services, benefits, and risk management to develop these processes just to make our determinations about requests, and also discussing with legal counsel and our bargaining units, the stipulations for those granted exceptions and next processes. And one of the things I think it's important for people to be mindful of is the distinction between exemption and exception. So an exemption, Beth, Beth. Oh, okay. So when we talk about an exemption, we talk about a thing that is not subject to a rule or a law, like it doesn't apply, right? Like a tax exemption. You are exempt from paying taxes, does not apply to you. Whereas an exception doesn't relieve you from the responsibility of following the rule. It simply grants you an exception to that rule for an approved reason. So people have been asking why the difference in terms, and while we didn't choose it ourselves, I think that is the reason behind the selection of the word at the state level, and that's what we're implementing consistently.
Thank you, Beth. If you can go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So this is a correspondence that we sent out to our staff in regards to the exceptions and protocols. And so we have afforded them opportunity to look at those medical exemption and religious exemption forms that they have to fill out on their own. And as we are processing these exceptions, we're looking at how we can mitigate risk and keep all of our staff safe. Those that are afforded an opportunity to have an approved religious or medical exemption, they need to be kept safe. Our students need to be kept safe, and our staff. And so we are working through a process where these are some of the listed things in terms of signing in and answering health questions, weekly COVID screenings and attestations through the daily check-in system, wearing a well-fitted N95 or KN95 mask at all times, following increased social distancing, eating and drinking in spaces away from others, plexiglass or other barriers if you share spaces, and potential position changes to minimize risk for employees. This is not a complete and comprehensive list, and we want to be, I think the most important thing is we want to ensure health and safety for all of our students and staff. Michelle, go into the next slide.
Test, yeah. Okay, the vaccination collection piece where we need to be responsible as an employer and be able to verify that the vaccination, proof of vaccination is true and that the exceptions are actually qualifying, and we've set up this process to collect that. It is, like Kana said, a system. In order for it to make sense as we move through it, it needs to be thoughtful. And Jordan Beveridge has developed an internal website full of information for staff that has reflected communications that we've already sent out about both collection of vaccination proof and the exceptions. The method for collecting that information won't be live until next week, but we have a lot of people feeling anxious about the process. So we wanted to go ahead and get that information out there. So the website will be released this week. We're going to start with our administrative and super tech staff as pilots to make sure that as the collection goes out, we receive the information and are able to follow up appropriately, and then to all staff next week. And then HR is working through a process for replacement of staff if needed. Unfortunately, there is an October 18th deadline, and so we will need to have all of our verifications done by that time. And we may have some staff elect to leave us, and so we will be looking at replacement staff as needed.
Thanks, Michelle. All right, I think Travis is next.
Thank you, Kana. The next slides are just meant to inform the board. The images or the speaker's notes have more links so that you can investigate the data that I'm going to share, and then I'll give a brief update on a screening testing program that we're hoping to pilot soon. So I'm not able to answer medical or epidemiological questions tonight, but if you have those, you can dig further into the documents. Go ahead and click forward one. So the first one is the epi curve for the state of Oregon, and you can see some cause for hope this week that we're flattening the curve after the tallest spike that we've seen. And again, this is from the Oregon Health Authority. Go ahead and click one more. The next couple slides are from an OHSU report, and these are models that they've offered. You can read the full report if you'd like to, but again, we'll see the model showing that the predicted spike, go ahead and go one more slide forward, would happen either on September 6th or sometime after it. And these models are based on moderate intervention, meaning that most people comply with mask mandates, and that would predict a drop in cases. what I thought was really favorable about this is that we would see a steep decline and lower cases than before once we reach potentially October, November, December. There are different models in the report you can see, but this is the one they call the primary scenario for us. So this is a reason to continue to wear masks right now and practice physical distancing and all the mitigation strategies Dale described. It also signals a little bit of hope, which is good for me. Hope it is for you. Next slide, please. A new dashboard came out this week from, I believe, Oregon Department of Education in collaboration with OHA, and then you can see the Willamette ESD was involved in publishing this dashboard. You can click into this hyperlink and find several different slides. This one you can select your county and you can see the case transmission rate is high. There's only one county in Oregon that's anything other than high transmission right now. You can also see county case counts and test positivity rates in the green ones on the left here. Then at the bottom, you can see the school and pediatric information, which shows that pediatric cases have spiked and are going down in Washington County, which I found to be relieving. And you can see another one over here for students and staff on the right at the bottom. So what we're hoping is that we can track that our mitigation strategies are not causing a spike, but instead helping with COVID rates, especially pediatric cases in Washington County. That's our hope if we do well. Go ahead, one more slide, please. You probably know that OHA is now releasing a weekly outbreak report, which captures data for active cases and outbreaks at workplaces, care facilities, child cares, and K-12 education facilities. So you can see us there on page 76. If you watch something like Coin News, you might see them report that several schools in Hillsboro have cases and Evergreen Middle School has an outbreak. If you read more closely, which they didn't say out loud on the news, is that an outbreak is defined by 2 or more cases. And those 2 cases at Evergreen were actually resolved by Labor Day weekend. And so these are latecomers to data. And what we don't want is the community just hearing the term outbreak on the news or radio or social media and thinking, oh my goodness, I gotta stay home. My kids are not going to school. What we'd like is to provide factual information. So click forward one more. Beth Grazer and her team have decided to put the weekly COVID report right on our banner for the website. So if you would like to seek further information, there's the OHA report for workplaces from Dairy Queen to HSD. And you can see that there are hundreds of cases in schools across the state, but that you can track down to a school or down to Hillsboro where we see multiple cases. Next slide. So 3 key takeaways that I would love for the board to take away in the community this afternoon is we are seeing cases, individual cases among students and staff of COVID or exposures where folks are asked to quarantine or isolate, but there's currently no evidence of community spread within schools right now in Hillsboro. We are continuing to implement a multi-layered mitigation approach. If there is a positive case that impacts a student or staff member in HSD, we'll notify those impacted within 24 hours. And when we say that, we mean classrooms, sports teams, bus routes, etc. Right now we have 2 layers of communication. One is a heads up letter notification to families, and we have activated that multiple times since the spring. And then the other one would be this is a notice that we are going to go into distance learning, or we are going to ask a sports team to stay home. And that is one that we haven't gotten to yet, but we're ready to do that when we need to. So I wanted you to have an update on the data, and hopefully you can dig in further where you're interested via the links in this slide deck. The next one is an update on one way that we may be able to participate in a public health effort to provide screening to students in K-12 schools. Go ahead and click one more. The CDC has offered money to OHA and ODE in order to equip local labs with increased capacity for screening. It's a PCR screening saliva test in our area, with OHSU being our local lab. And you might ask, why are we doing this? The idea in other countries, including Great Britain, has been to identify asymptomatic COVID cases so that students can quarantine prior to developing symptoms or not even developing symptoms at all. So essentially you could, as a parent, I could receive a test each week, and I could help my son and daughter spit into a test tube put it into a plastic bag, drop it off at school, and I'd get an email that says they're either positive or negative. And if they had a positive case, I'd get a call from a nurse at OHSU. And therefore, I'd be able to participate in keeping other kids safe at my student's school. So this would work purely voluntarily. Families would sign up. Kits would come to schools on a given day, say a Monday. Students would take the kits home, say on a Monday afternoon, spit in a tube in the morning. OHSU would pick up the samples from the school in a box with a cool pack in it in the morning. And then they would have those tubes to the lab by that afternoon, and phone calls would come in that evening or the next day. One more slide with a couple more details. Our next steps are to pilot this process at 3 elementary schools. We'll get permission forms in multiple languages. We're collaborating with OHSU and Portland Public on that. And then we're going to work on a logistical partnership with OHSU, including a van that they use as a courier to get these samples to schools, out to families, and back to schools, and then to OHSU, really in like a 48-hour window. And then if we can figure this out, we would expand, hopefully, to all of our schools. We are prioritizing schools where students don't have access to vaccines first, per the recommendation of OHSU, which is our elementary schools this time. So we hope to roll this out in the next couple of weeks. I know there are many questions about this in the community, so I'd invite any questions about the COVID data or the screening testing program.
Any particular reason besides them being elementary schools why those 3 schools were chosen as our pilot program? And have we been reaching out to the different parent advisory councils, letting them know that this might be a thing coming up and asking them how they feel about it?
Yes, the first question is why those 3 schools? Those 3 schools' principals volunteered because they had some logistical capacity to do this, and they were willing to do it in these first weeks of school. So thank you to those principals and to their office managers and health room folks. We've already met with them. We advertise this coming on our social media outlets, but we haven't engaged with any parent groups specifically about this. We are planning multilingual communications and communications supported by our liaisons, because we've gotten some questions about the security of the data, especially as it relates to immigration status.
How long we're going to do this? How long we expect the CDC funds to hold out? Will it cover that time?
I don't know. OHSU approached us as though it was a year-long project.
And how long might it be before we see implementation at these 3 schools?
We have emails ready to go to the families, but we're waiting on the multilingual consent forms and registration forms that would go to parents. We want that to be as open to families from different language backgrounds as possible. So we're not going to launch until we feel like we can have those documents ready to go. We think maybe next week.
I have a question, like, how fast do results come for families that do this?
They're saying right now that they can get results back to us within 24 hours of receipt at the clinic or at the lab. The lab would be at OHSU, and I'd assume they would get those samples by the afternoon of a given day and get to families within that time. I know that there's also stress in our medical providers for lab technicians and actual tests and protocols to actually do the thing. So they're telling us 24 hours right now is what a family could expect. And they hope to keep that up weekly as the program goes along, because each family would get a kit weekly.
I just got a question about how did the number for 2 become the outbreak? Do we have any reasoning or thought why?
No, we don't.
I'm pretty sure that was just determined by OHA as the number they wanted to use.
Just to follow up, I think that's really important to communicate, because you hear the word outbreak and I was just looking at that link that you provided, and a lot of the cases on here on that link are 1 student, 2 students, 3. They're very low numbers. but I think the wording might scare people.
I 100% agree with you.
All right. No further questions?
Oh, sorry, Nancy. Nancy didn't have a microphone.
Okay.
Mark, she was just saying that that's the reason that we have posted that on our website. Vice Chair Thomas was offering that, Mark, sorry. And yeah, I'd like to thank Beth too for her communication with the media outlets and coaching them on how to maybe use language that's accurate so that we don't unduly startle folks who watch the news. So thank you, Beth.
For like the spike for the census forecast, like when is that like major spike that they're predicting?
Yeah, if we go back to that slide, sorry, I didn't do a great job of showing the red and the black dots on that. It's the red dots show where we actually are and the black dots are the model. And so far you can see that the black dots cover up the red dots because that's what the folks who make the models show where we should be. The black dots represent the spike that they predict. And this was dated September 6th was when they thought that spike would be. There's some evidence that we're flattening, but not yet on the downhill. So this is the hope, I think the current model, but we'll see what that line, black dots, because that's into the future.
And like dots is like most like that.
Yeah, the factors that they look at here are like the factor by which we spread the variant, and then what's the word? Intervention strategies. So usually these drops coincide with some sort of a mandate, like a mask mandate or a closure of schools, or you can see historically when some sort of a mitigation strategy led to a downturn in the curve, and then we get comfortable and then it goes back up. So the epidemiologists kind of track and model what they think will happen. I don't think anybody thought that the Delta variant would result like this. Like if you heard the conversations back here, never modeled that spike, but that's the spike that we're riding right now.
And thank you, Travis, for being a makeshift epidemiologist.
I'm learning.
Just a reminder that Travis is not an epidemiologist.
Thank you, Mark.
Hey, Mark, there is one more thing. We had a meeting with ODE and OHA this afternoon, and one of the things that they were speculating is that there's a lot of people that are believing that coming back to school is going to help that drop, is that there would be less spread because of the mitigation strategies that are employed for a long period of time each day, and that's actually going to help the drop. So I thought that was interesting.
So I personally would like to be kept up to date about once the data starts pouring in as to who's vaccinated, who's not, who's going to have exemption. And I know in different, like in healthcare, different organizations are like at maybe 85% vaccinated. So like those sectors are going to lose a lot of people. And my concern is how that will affect kids being able to continue going to school and basically what's like our bare minimum that we can run on, like, and when will we get a clear picture of that, of when that can happen and if that will happen.
Right. So yes, we are anxious for that date as well. October 18th, as you know, is the day that people vaccinated or have an exception to continue working with students. And we're in the process of sending out information. I think Anna mentioned that at the end of this week, we're going to start collecting that vaccine, proof of vaccination. And next week, it'll happen in a broader way. So within the next couple of weeks, we'll have a good indication of the percentage of students or percentage of staff that we believe are vaccinated. We, of course, would not share a list of names who those people are, but we could definitely get you the percentages. And we've already started the problem solving where we think we might have some issues, where staff is going to be coming in. So, for example, as we've talked about over and over again, it's pretty clear that we have there's a statewide, nationwide shortage of bus drivers throughout. And we know that right now, if we drop too many bus drivers, then we're going to have to get pretty creative with what we're doing. So everything from condensing routes to offering to pay parents to transport their own students, to having students on buses longer, to make more of a hard line on the walk zone. We're going to have all of those things just to keep getting kids to school. So we're on a thin margin already with buses. We believe we're going to be okay with our licensed staff because all indications show that we have a high percentage that are already there. There's some of our other staff groups that we're just not certain yet, and we won't know.
I also want to add in a little bit of perspective for you all. First of all, many of you know that I work for the Department of Human Services for the state of Oregon. And these are the numbers that we got today in our AOC, and just keep this in mind. And again, I'm submitting this to you to understand in perspective where you are. There are slightly over 6,000 employees for the Oregon Department of Human Services across the state. I think that's the number. Thus far, less than 2 weeks, we have had the method for us to be able to, one, file your upload, if you will, your vaccination status, and or to submit your documentation for your medical exemption or medical exception, thank you very much, or to apply for your closely held religious belief exception. Thus far, there have been over 600 people who have applied for a closely religiously held reason and exception. There have been only 99 that have applied for a medical exception. And there are over 450 who have uploaded their vaccination information. Just keep that in mind. So for a huge organization that has that many people, that's how slowly this is happening, although it's happening very fast. The fact that you're just now starting with your process, I salute you. You're doing well. Trust me, you're doing well. It took us a couple of weeks to figure out. The mandate came out. 2 weeks later, we had the method. A week later, we had the forms. We have now advised all of our contractors that they too have to be vaccinated. We're going through their process as well. So I'm just saying that to you for perspective, right? To understand we are on point, believe it or not, because somebody threw a dart on a board and chose my birthday, October 18th, to decide that everybody had to be vaccinated. So I'm just saying, keep it in mind. Remember that you're doing okay, and it's going to take a little while before the numbers start coming out. Try to get a weekly update on how the numbers are doing. And then, of course, our union, which is huge, they have their own estimations of what they're saying. So, and at this point, the rumor in my particular district, where I have 1,000 employees, is that up to 40% of my staff is opting for an exception. So again, I'm just sharing that for perspective.
My question is pretty simple, and maybe it's a silly question, but is there any possibility that we could try and get an actual epidemiologist? Thank you, Travis, for your hard work, but somebody who has more extensive training can answer more of our questions, especially if they were able to speak at one of our main sessions very briefly and just have a little bit of perspective for community members so they could hear from an expert, and for us as well as we're trying to understand and make decisions.
So
at the outset, we did have somebody, a couple presenters from Washington County and Washington County Public Health. I think that would be our most likely point of intersection. I think maybe we could get Marnie or whatever to come back, but we can talk about that.
Yeah, one of the things that we've been careful about is not to be the main communication point when it comes to science. Right? There's so much controversy over this is science, this isn't. The number of people that have disagreed with the step that's been taken and have quoted science is pretty remarkable. And so we've taken ourselves out of that equation, to be honest. And we have relied heavily on CDC, Oregon Health Authority, and Washington County Public Health. So I don't know if that's the right use of time for us when we've got so many instructional issues to talk about. I just don't know if that's the right use of time. I'm happy to talk with Mark and Nancy about it, get further direction from the board, but it wouldn't be my first preference to spend our time now.
Yeah, for me, it would probably be most likely if Washington County would like to use or participate in our forum as a way to get their message out, the scientific message out. That'd be kind of what we did last time. It was jointly we decided, yeah, okay, this was a good thing, and give them an opportunity to speak at our meeting to get a little bit broader public voice.
Thanks. I had a follow-up question because this is tied to the issues that Dale had mentioned earlier about like traffic and just dropping off, and also with the bus situation and what we're going to do. Is any of our funding that is being given to like county, city, or us, can any of that be used to figure out how to get more sidewalks? Because I think if we want to solve some of those problems with getting less people to drive, I think it's also sustainable if more kids can walk or ride their bikes. But a lot of the issues that we have with our current infrastructure is that we don't have sidewalks in some of our areas or walk routes. So I'm wondering if that money can at all be spent that way. Shall I repeat my question?
I think sidewalks are a city issue, so we'd have to have a discussion with the city about how we would channel funds to the city, I think, which is not something commonly done.
Well, and typically we're trying to figure out how to funnel money from the city to the school district is usually what we're trying to do. Casey works with the city on a very regular basis regarding this issue. Everything from where crosswalks are to sidewalks. Casey, I don't know if you want to add anything.
No. Okay, rows like this. So we do meet regularly with the city and the Safe Routes to School coordinator there to identify all of our boundaries and hazard zones. The reality is, even if we were able to identify those and actually go through the process to design, construct, and build, we're usually about an 18-month process. And a lot of those projects, while it may seem like a sidewalk is not a lot of money, when you start really digging into easements and all that, it becomes a pretty significant project. So I guess the short answer is we do regularly communicate with the city on the district's wishes to provide more opportunities for families to walk to school. The reality is actually getting those significant projects done to make a large difference is much longer and challenging than a short term.
My follow-up is, or FTEs for crosswalk guards, or like something to help us. If we're going to lose the bus, we want more people to be able to walk, because it is I'm one of these parents that are living through that traffic situation. I hear it all the time.
Yeah, we do have we did talk briefly today about the FTE and what could we look at to increase the amount of crossing guards we have. Would that impact the number of buses that we're using? So we are looking into that. That one's barely on the radar compared to some of them.
Do we have anything else on this topic? I'm trying to look at the room. Thank you, everyone, for all the time you put into this report. It's very illuminating, and obviously
we got two more slides for Dale.
Hey, Mark.
All right.
Hey, Mark. I just wanted to real quickly talk about enrollment, just in a few advance. So just as of yesterday, right, we're still counting our kids and reaching out to those students who haven't yet shown up. These are kind of our totals. It looks like about 19,600 kids overall. At the Hillsboro Online Academy, about a month ago, I would have told you we had about 400 kids. We're up to about 923, a little over 800 that are full-time, and then we have concurrent enrollments at the high school and a few at the middle school level. So really excited that we have that as an offering for our families who are not feeling comfortable or because of circumstances are not safe to return. So we're excited about that. The nice thing is with everyone being at in an online virtual environment last year, as we make movements to staff or we hire new staff, we have systems to support that transition. So that's been great, but we're excited. We keep reaching out. We're headed towards the 10-day drop window in another 5 days, I think. And so we just keep reaching out and checking in on our families who we haven't yet seen and trying to get them back to us or mark where they might have moved or decisions that they could have made differently about their students' education at this time. So thank you.
My recollection is that we saw a major drop off at the outset of last year, middle of COVID CDL, in kindergartners. Did we see a returning surge to the first grade?
Our first grade numbers look about the same as our second grade numbers. We're about 1,300. We have about 1,100 kindergartners, but that's about the average number by grade. So it looks like perhaps we got them back.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you all. Yeah. Our next couple of topics are more discussion-y, so I will try to use the people I can see to figure out where we're at. Oftentimes we've done a board self-evaluation. A few years ago when we had several new members, we tabled it for the year to let those members get their feet under them. And then last year we did a full 360. So we'd like to hear your thoughts and where you're at on the concept of doing a board self-evaluation. It would probably be in the spring, just after the superintendent evaluation, but we'd want to lay the foundation and seeds and groundwork for that now. So does anyone have any thoughts they'd like to share on whether or not we should do a self-evaluation? And if we should, what sort of form and shape it would take?
I'll start. I was thinking that just looking at our existing process or what we've done before, it almost seems we'd never know when we have change on our leadership. And so if we do it this year, our new board members would only be on like 9 months or whatever long. And is that a great snapshot, or should we do it the following year after an election? Would, to me, would seem like a cadence that we could keep repeating if it's the second year after the election, and that we know that happens every other. So I don't know, just thinking about how do we structure this so that it's not, I feel like every year, but it is with a new board makeup and also with board members that have had the time to kind of fill out their role and also learn the roles and responsibilities and be effective, like giving them an opportunity to, like you said, get caught up.
I would agree with Erica. So it would almost be like every other year type of thing, right?
And for the new board members, this is something that we've done pretty regularly. We did skip my first year, sort of because we were getting our feet under us. And so it is quite the undertaking, and we will have just come off of so I mean, in the absence of an overwhelming support to do it, I would sort of be in favor of maybe waiting a year, and then also we should discuss how exhausted the community is on the 360 concept. I think we recently, very recently, just last time, did very extensive 360 comments, and all that stuff is available in the board archive, and very illuminating comments. So I mean, I don't know that people have the stamina for that kind of request again. So maybe I would sort of suggest, yes, the every other year, and then maybe every, what would it be, fourth year that we ask for the 360 feedback. But that's just one thought.
Hey, Mark, this is Nancy. I am in agreement that we ought to do a self-evaluation. I am not in the agreement that we should do it during this school year. I think that we should put it on we should map it out for the next 10 years, to be honest with you, so that we have a cycle, a rhythm, that we know when it occurs. And honestly, I think there's too much emphasis put on whether they're new board members. There should always be new board members, and everyone is not always. I just don't think that having new board members is the reason why we should or should not have it, is what I'm saying. So that's why if I had an opinion, it would be that we put it on a schedule and we do it that way. As far as the 360 is concerned, the 360 was the election. And I'm just being honest with you. I think the people spoke. I think they spoke loud and clear. Whether it was for us or against it, it doesn't matter. They spoke really loud. So 360, nah, I've had enough of 360. I got it. That's my thought.
Mark, you can't see me, but this is Lisa. Since you're not interrupting me, I think you can hear me. Cool. Okay. So I like the idea of mapping out for a long time, and I think that's kind of what Erica was getting at, is coming up with like a set hunk of time. So not every year we're talking about, should we do it, should we not do it? And I get the idea about delaying when we have new board members, because the idea is that we haven't worked together long enough to be able to effectively evaluate the quality of our work together. So I think that's I'm sorry, I'm very brain dead at this point in the day. That's sort of the motivation for wanting to delay it. But I also think it's important that we evaluate how we work together. And if you're not assessing the quality of your work, you don't have the same opportunity to improve it. And if we wait consistently 2 years between evaluations, then there's potentially 2 years of not optimal work happening. And I don't know if that's something I'm super on board with. So if that's what it sounds like, that's kind of what everybody wants to do. So I think that I'm not like fervently against it. I just I am a big proponent of evaluation. And then the idea of the 360, Nancy, you're super funny. I totally agree that is what an election is. Some of us were not up for election though. And we do get a lot of really valuable feedback from that, particularly from like community partners and other like local electeds who have a different lens than the community at large that can be useful. I don't think that, I agree with what Mark said. We don't want to exhaust them and do that too often. So maybe every 4 years or 3 years is a good rhythm, but I think agreeing on that and kind of putting it is a good idea. I don't want to just get rid of that though. I think it is important. So, I'm not sure how put together that was, but those are my ideas. I was gonna say, can I have a process suggestion for maybe having a couple of board members meet with Rose and work on a proposal for a schedule for the next 10 years or something? So what years would be this evaluation and the depth of what we're doing, and then bring that back to the whole board and we can decide if we all are in agreement.
And I also, I mean, I understand, Lisa, I think, is very accurate with her observations. I would be a fan of 360 feedback periodically at appropriate intervals, because we do get those community leaders and other elected officials that with whom we interface in the community. And the idea of a 10-year schedule, while appealing in, I don't know, more normal times, I do worry a little that some of the reason why we're reluctant to put more on our plates or anybody's plate during this time is just because of how overworked and overwhelmed most people are dealing with the repercussions of the pandemic. And, you know, I would love to think that that curve that Travis showed us is going to be accurate. but I don't know that it's the case. And so I'd be reluctant to make too many 10-year horizon decisions while we're still knee deep in this particular pandemic.
Mark, I also agree. I think that we could have feedback. Can you hear me now? Okay, so I agree we need to do the feedback. I also agree that we need to have some spacing in that. I take Lisa's point about having that extended period of time of not having that feedback and change, but I think that we can come to each other and speak to each other and say, hey, I'm seeing this issue or I'm seeing that issue, and get that taken care of, and not wait till evaluation time to deal with it.
Yeah, and in pre-COVID era, when we would gather to work together, we would actually gather to work together. That's not something we really get to do much. So, oh, sorry, Mike, are you expecting a decision tonight or just has to have a discussion?
I think you may have missed Lisa's comment about your trip to Ireland. I just wanted to point it out for those that missed it.
I said certainly not on mic that says the guy in Ireland about us not being together, and it was really funny and everybody laughed. You're welcome.
It's a fair point.
Yeah. I think what we're hearing now is this year, let's take a pause for this year. And how about Rose and I put together a schedule for the next 4 or 5 years, just as a draft for you to consider. We can have on there the evaluation years and just maybe an idea of what the evaluation would entail. And then we'll bring it back for you to take a look at. Does that work for everybody? Perfect.
This is the point where we normally look around and look for head nods. Mike, you got the head nods you're looking for?
Got him. Thank you.
All right. Our next item is a discussion of the board goals, and we looked at them in the all-day retreat, and then we did have one board member submit some suggestions. Hopefully you've seen those suggestions in your packet. I would love to get feedback on the proposed changes to our board goals from the board at large.
So the way it's laid out there is that there's 3 bullet points to represent the 3 goals that we have. There were no suggestions for the first bullet. The second bullet, there is a proposed edit to that goal as well as the third bullet. So I didn't feel like it was appropriate for Rose and I to say yay or nay to that, but it needs to be a board discussion regarding your goals. So just interested in feedback on that second and third goal in particular, on those goals in particular, to see which direction you want to go with that.
So I have a couple of concerns with the edit suggested, in particular for the second goal. I think that striking the word use for consider when it comes to student input sets a bad message, especially I think my biggest concern with getting student involvement, something that I know from being in high school and around high schoolers all the time, and having been in middle school and around middle schoolers all the time, is that kids know when you're just asking them to ask them and not asking them because you care. We need to be very strong and committed in knowing that we are going to use that input and knowing that we are going to actively involve it in our processes, that we aren't just talking to students for the sake of talking to them, or they aren't going to give you honest feedback. They will simply skim through your survey, turn it in as quickly as possible so that the advisory teacher stops talking to them about it and move on. If you want them to give you real honest feedback, you have to show that it means something to you. And I think that saying that we're just going to consider it sends that wrong kind of message. It tells them that kind of idea of it's just a consideration and disregards the fact that a student is the expert on a student's experience of school. I'm also concerned with striking the idea that we are stating clearly in our goals that we're concerned about equity and equitable processes. I think that if that is a goal of our district, which from everything I've seen in here, and knowing that we have an equity officer in the room, that seems to be something that we consider very strongly. So I think it should be an explicit part of the goals that we talk about when we're trying to guide our mission for the coming year.
Like to add onto that, like use versus consider, even if like we like, I think the like two most important things of education, I think, is student input and equity. And that right here is literally being like kind of taken out. And I feel like that's just, I don't really agree with that. Because even you can ask for student input, but if you just say we're going to consider it, it makes it feel as if we're a second thought, like we're not actually the main thought, as if like our voice is just like a little comment, not the main discussion, when it should be the main discussion. And I feel like if these are goals, these are ideals. The ideal should always be using student input. And so I think that if our goal is to consider, then like I don't really like, I don't think that is really like going to progress us to where we want to be. And then I also think for striking out so they align with the district's value of educational equity and serve, I just don't understand why that's stricken out, because like, so then without it would be like to improve policies and procedures to promote success among all students. I can see like there might be some like redundancy, but I think it also needs to be very clearly stated that we are focused on educational equity because that's something that matters.
I guess we'll go around, but I think I agree. I like we've had them before. I think what I remember from our retreat was that there was maybe some like grammar or maybe just like some rewording around those lines, but I definitely wouldn't like to consider adopting the changes. I think that I definitely see, and even in our presentation earlier this afternoon when we met with our strategic planning consultants, one of the reasons why we selected them specifically because of their focus on student voice and centering around students and outcomes, and really looking at access and equitable access for our district and our students. So I definitely like the way that we had it before, and we've done a lot of work, I would say, in the last 4 years as a board, maybe even longer, and just lifting up these, like the pack that we just heard from tonight, that presented their point of view, where before our board didn't even have an avenue to have a conversation with parents like that, or even hear their concerns or what is working and what recommendations they might have for our board. And I think taking away the emphasis on historically underserved families almost undoes everything that we worked for in the last 4 years to create these packs, to elevate those voices that we weren't hearing from before. So I definitely would I want to keep what we had before.
We're going to hear from everyone.
Are we going around
So
or
we'll
are
go.
we just taking our turn?
Yeah, maybe let's go around. Yeah, I think maybe go
I
around.
would go, but I'm at the end of the table where you can't see me. So
You got a microphone though.
I do, and I'm not afraid to use it.
Understand the concerns that have been raised. I don't see.
If I had to vote right now, Mark, I would say no on the changes. That's just me. Oh, I would prefer it as it was written because I thought we had the emphasis where we needed it to be. I thought that the changes brought in some a different nuance that I wasn't prepared for.
I would have to agree with the student reps, Eric, and see that with our original goals that, as they're stated there, especially because, you know, over the last 4 years, we have been doing so much work on equity. I think it's really important to have that.
I think I suggested that they be less wordy, and I feel, but I don't think this, this is not what I meant. So hopefully this wasn't my suggestion, because I don't like it. The crossing out of the things, I agree with what Erica said, that yeah, I think it changes the focus away from what we've been working so hard to make it. So it's important for us to be clear. And I don't agree strongly with the consider, but that might be because, like, I'm a teacher and my high school students wanted me to use their suggestion for norms where I shall always provide snacks, like as an example. And I would like to consider that, but not necessarily use that suggestion, although I do have snacks. So, but I hear what you guys are saying. And what I think it was Seth that said, your goal, no, that was Michelle, your goal really should be like the thing that you aspire to be, right? And so we should aspire to do. So I really like that. It spoke to me. So I've changed my mind and I like use. Good job, Michelle. Okay, so I agree with what's been said. I think I like them as they were originally written, and I'm not a fan of the changes. I would not like to support those.
Mark, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, I haven't, I think, have we heard from everyone?
Yes.
Oh, I might have missed Monique then. All right. Might have just been a microphone issue. Yeah, the concept of consider instead of use had some appeal initially, but we're not saying exclusively use. We just will use student voices. So I'm okay with the original language there. I think that we should hold ourselves up to the goal of aligning with the district's education. So I would not be in favor of using the strike through. I would be in favor of the original language. Rose and Mike, is this something on which we have to vote or just discuss and head nod? What's the procedural thing we need to do here?
We will go ahead and vote on these during our next meeting.
Okay, thanks.
But we will bring back the 3 bullets as they were written. So I think we've got majority of people there. So I think we're good.
All right. The next discussion item is the working agreements. Looks like there were no changes proposed to that. Is that another thing that we would just vote on next meeting, the language that we have?
Yeah, it is. There was one cross out, and that was under personnel issues. And that was a simple one because it's already required in Oregon revised statute. So that's an easy cross out. So yeah, we'll be ready at next meeting for that. Yes, that was.
All right. Anybody else? Anybody have any more discussion on that topic? All right. Next topic is board professional development discussion. Mike and Michelle, I think, have some stuff to talk about. And just in case you haven't heard, the OSBA conference scheduled for November has been canceled, not moved to virtual, but eliminated completely. So.
Yes, very true. We were actually surprised that there wasn't a virtual option there, but we will see. You'll see on the next slide that NSBA is currently scheduled from April 2nd to 4th in San Diego. So be thinking about that if that's something that will fit your schedule. We don't know if that's going to be held as is yet or not, but we should know in the next couple months. The next slide talks about the various committees that are opportunities for board members to participate in. So these are committees that are up and running and happen throughout the school year. Oftentimes we have board members that want to participate in these, and you don't need to necessarily sign up tonight, but know that these options, in fact, maybe we just go, why don't we give you a brief overview of what these are? You should just take a second. They can participate, yeah. Well, not bargaining, right. So yes, kind of, again. So Career and College Pathway Steering Committee. Travis, you want to do a 30-second commercial? Oh, Casey may have to disagree with that. You want to do the next one?
Long-range facilities planning is a monthly meeting where we have our city and county partners along with district staff. We review everything from enrollment to building capacities to looking at the long-term range and capacity of our buildings for facilities planning in the future. Certainly, we use a lot of that information in pre-bond planning. It kind of guides where we go and needs for our next school bond. And yeah, I think that's it.
You want to do safety while you've got the mic?
Okay, safety committee. So 2 times a year, once in the fall and once in the spring, we bring our law enforcement agency partners, parents, and district staff to take a look at safety measures in our district. Could be things, everything from building hardware cameras to some of our safety plans for students, how we all come up with that, and really look at our partners within the law enforcement community. And we have traditionally had a couple board members present at that.
All right, coffee chats, that's something that you'll have the opportunity to participate in. We basically advertise when those are. We oftentimes have board members show up to those. It's an opportunity for the community just to share what's on their mind. And we listen. We've got a lot of great feedback over the years, some of it very direct, but important for us to hear. It also provides an opportunity for us to provide clarification on issues as well. The high school students portion there, I think they each high school each year and get a broad representation of students, and we have conversations about a variety of issues. A number of you have participated in that. I think that's been very useful on what high school students are thinking. Audit Committee, Michelle.
Oh, may I? It's actually a party. Martin Granum used to get very excited about the Audit Committee. There's usually snacks if it's in person. High school students are welcome. Everyone is welcome. There is, it's an opportunity to interface directly with our independent auditor and go over the review process, get a sense of the testing that they do to ensure that we're accountable for the resources we've been given. And yeah, if you're interested, let me know. I'd love to have you be a part of it. Board members as well. Thank you.
Travis Lau plan.
Every 2 years, we review our English learner plan. So it's our plan to support emerging bilinguals, everything from English language development to our dual language program. And this year we are up for revising that. You'd be a proofreader on a team who would ask questions and give input from a board perspective on how you'd like that plan to be represented by HSD.
And we currently have both of our board members, Erica and Mark, on board, and we get to meet and have fun and eat.
Beth already did the strategic planning piece, so I think you're pretty much aware what that is. Do you want to just let me know now, or would you rather us email you so you're not publicly shamed if you don't find it?
And Mike or Rose, what is sort of the standard commitment a board member makes? 2 committees, 3 committees, 1 committee? I know I have traditionally served on the Long Range Facilities Planning Committee and the Classified Bargaining Committee on this list. And I'm happy to continue doing those things, but if any other board member would like those opportunities, I would be happy to step aside.
Yeah, we haven't really had it standard. It really is just dependent on the availability of the board member and what their capacity is. There are times when board members have more capacity, some years where they've got more capacity than others. So we haven't really gone about it that way. The ones that we need people on are classified and licensed. And the strategic planning team, of course, that will be part of your work. The others are really just at your availability and if that's a high interest area for you. So don't want you to feel obligated at the same time we wanted to provide
And I mean, we do have to sort of be careful to not have more than 3 board members on any particular committee.
True. Hasn't been a problem in the past, just with people's capacity to do that. So how about we send out an email to you, and then you can let us know if there are any of these that you would be interested in. I think the great news is that we're covered in bargaining, and those are oftentimes difficult to get that level of commitment.
I was just gonna say, maybe when you send something out, Rose, it could be like a Google Doc or something, so we can see who's signing up for what, and if we
Oh,
see
nice.
overlap, we can.
Do we have an alternate for the 2 bargaining committees? Because I think the first or the upcoming bargaining committee will be when I'm not back yet.
I don't believe we do. Maybe we do.
Okay.
Thanks, Nancy.
All right. You wanted to talk about also, do we have a slide for that? The other possible, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, this is Michelle for the next several slides. Mark, I don't know if you heard, but Nancy did say she could be an alternate during your absence. All right, Michelle.
Thanks, Mike. This is usually information that we go over at the board retreat. So I'd like to get it to you a little bit earlier in the year, but just wanted to share with you how to access resources we have set aside for the board. They are accessible through Rose. She is the administrative support for both the superintendent and the board budget. All of the board's purchases do go by Mike and self as part of the approval process, so know that that's in place. The board budget items include the auditor fees, because that's they are employees to the board. Board member travel, professional development, dues and fees, election and translation services, the technology, hardware, software, and the subscription services that you need to stay informed all fall under that area of our budget, and then also meeting supplies. So that's information about the budget. If you'd like to have any questions about it or want to see line by line detail, I'm happy to provide that in the board update. If we could advance the slide. Oh, thank you. Strange angle. Okay. For purchases and reimbursement. So this is the same policy that we have in place for our staff in terms of being reimbursed for any expenses related to your board work. We do have a 30-day turnaround period. So that's our, if you do something, we need those records submitted to Rose and then to the business office within 30 days. We have some restrictions around the meal expenses and items that fall outside of our district's ability to purchase. If you have any questions about that, Rose is great. She can offer guidance. The IRS guidelines for meals, those are guidelines. There are exceptions to that, but it's important that we follow those as much as possible. And district business travel in a private vehicle, that can be reimbursed at 56 cents per mile. All right, please advance. And so this is a little bit more about the professional development requests, and these usually are handled by Rose and Mike, so I'm gonna give it back over.
Really, over the last several years, we have not been in a place where we've had to really deny professional development requests when it comes to spending money for a particular conference or that kind of thing. So I think the working agreements actually spell out some of the thresholds there. But the bottom line is, if there's a professional development opportunity that you're interested in, if you would let Rose and I know and let us do a little homework and see what the total cost would be, then that is something we can share with the rest of the board. And like I said, we haven't had an issue over the last several years. It's been, we've been able to approve those. Again, it's a lot of times it's a capacity issue for people if they're going to be able to get away from work and go to a conference. So let us know and we will do the homework for you, and then we can share with the rest of the board. I think there's one more slide, maybe. Threshold we were talking about.
Anybody have any questions? Go ahead, Mike.
One of the things that we had agreed to over the last several years is that when a board member does participate in professional development, is to make certain that the learning that was acquired is shared with the rest of the board. So we typically, following an event, you have the opportunity to share with the board kind of your takeaways from that, from professional development. That's it, Mark.
Somebody have a reaction today thinking they might want to go to the NSBA conference should it take place in April?
Okay, I'm planning on, but I'm gonna look to my OSBA board role.
Right.
Cover that.
I would probably be interested in going. The last time I went was San Antonio a few years ago, and it's if you have the time, it's a very great opportunity to meet board members from all over the country and learn sort of the different ways that they do things and be informed about. So like in Illinois, they have whole school districts just for elementary schools and then whole school districts first. So you change school districts when you matriculate to the high school.
I was gonna say, maybe one suggestion also, I think we just mentioned NSBA, but they, and OSB, obviously that conference was canceled, but there is the Equity Symposium, which is one of the best conferences I've heard. And it's a subset of NSBA, but it's held differently. And there's also the CUBE conference, which is CUBE, which I believe is around more urban school districts. But they also put on a conference that is around education, and I've also heard really great things about that. So I know since OSBA isn't doing one, maybe just sharing that information as possible interest.
And is Take It Up amongst these kind of things, or is that separate, just a district opportunity?
That's a district opportunity, no cost, and you are always welcome to those.
All right. The other thing to discuss in here is the OSBA board and LPC board nominations. This feels like an action. So feels like an action item, but is it just a discussion?
Yep. Discussion this time, vote next time.
Makes sense. Okay, so Erica Lopez has served as one of our region's representatives on the OSBA board, and I believe her term is up, and she intends to continue. Erica, would you like to say anything on that front?
Yes, hi everyone, me again. It's been a great opportunity to serve on OSBA these last couple of years. I think that OSBA as an organization is in a very important point, and I would appreciate continuing to work there and working on what we want to do for the next 10 years as an association and how we support school board members. So I'm super excited. We have brand new elected also board members from different areas, and I'm really excited about the leadership and where we're going in the next couple of years. So I'm looking forward to doing work with them.
So Rose, do we have to do anything tonight to indicate our support for Erica, or just so we'll compose language to renominate her for next meeting?
Yes.
If it wasn't clear,
All
yes,
right.
please nominate me again.
Yes, I believe it is our intent to renominate Erica for her position. Is my role on the LPC up? I think I see Rose nodding yes. So one of these subset committees on Oregon School Boards Association is the Legislative Policy Committee, which involves crafting the legislative agenda that the lobbyists for the Oregon School Boards Association will use when they discuss the goals for a legislative session with representatives and senators. I've enjoyed being on the committee very much. I'm happy to continue. If somebody else would like to do it, I'm happy to step aside and let them do it. It's a great learning experience. And if you want to learn a lot more about how things that we think maybe we should be able to control are not really in our control, it's a great way to sort of start to understand the interaction between what's governed at the state level and what's governed at the local level. So does anybody have an interest in replacing me on that?
Looks like it's you again.
All right. And for what it's worth, we don't get to just decide. It's a region thing. And I believe our region has 3 members. Is that right, Rose?
Yes.
Sounds like, I think that's the case. So, yeah, I would put my name forward for reconsideration and renomination next meeting. And then all of the other school districts in our region will have to vote to confirm the 3 people who will be on the members of that committee. All right. Next up, after having just named an elementary school, we have another building to name, and Casey, I believe, will walk us through all the research and where we're heading in that direction.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. You guys remember at our board retreat, we were a little time constrained, so we didn't get to spend maybe as much time as we wanted to. In your packet, I've tried to summarize where we've been, where we are with the potential renaming of the Miller Education Center West Campus, and also the naming of our new building that is being constructed right now. Just as a timeline reminder, if we are to remain on track for where we had initially started, at the September regular session is when the board, when Mike would provide the list of finalists to the board to be considered. And at that meeting, the board would then vote to put a final name on 30-day review should they choose. I just want to remind the board, it is the board's prerogative to rename the campus and also name the new building that is going up. If you look at some of the information that we received, and since the board retreat, there was a suggestion that we open that survey back up to try to get some more feedback from our PACs. We did do that. Fran was able to open that up and get that out. The reality is we got little to no additional feedback. We are just in this spot where there is a lot more staff support for the renaming than actual community interest. Not to say that that's right or wrong. It's just different than naming a brand new school. So I want you to keep that in mind. We have a summary in your packet about where we are with the survey results. And just to kind of look at it, in narrowing the list, the names for 4 for the campus names and 4 for the new building, it's a little bit of a stretch. There's really some clean differentiation on 2 names for each. So if you were to look at the campus names, the Oak Street campus, based on our survey results, would be the most popular opinion. Now, on the survey, the next most popular name would be to remain the Miller Education Center. What I will say is that our task force, and the task force is listed here on the packet, that's a little different than what our task force would prefer. They actually like the Oak Street campus name and the Options and Opportunities campus as a campus name, with the caveat to honor the Miller name, Stan Miller, in other areas of the school, perhaps the gymnasium or other aspects of that campus. So a little bit, if you were to ask the task force, that's what they would recommend. The survey results are a little bit different. I will say that if you look at the dissection of who responded to the survey, it is heavy on HSD staff, not necessarily at MEC, but other places and staff, as opposed to traditionally when we're renaming a school or naming a school, it's really student and parent heavy. I do feel like we got a pretty good cross section of task force members that represented a lot of aspects of MEC, the community, and district staff. So really what I wanted to do is kind of share that information, also share the information of where the new building names kind of breakdown is, with number 1 being the Pathway Center, number 2 being the College and Career Center. there is a pretty large gap between those two names and the next ones, but also wanted to provide the board an opportunity to weigh in, give feedback, have a discussion, because we have the time at this meeting to do so. Even though at the regular session in September, we will have some additional time, just maybe not as much traditionally as we would at this work session. So if there's any questions that I can answer or any comments, please let me know or let us know.
I was gonna say that I think your point about when we were going through this process with like an elementary school or like any feeder school, really, I think there's more of a community feel and like interest. But because this campus is very much, it's for everybody, district-wide, there isn't a specific community that is very focused or looking at this as interest. So I understand now why it has been a challenge for us to get more input, but I appreciate the effort to open it up again and making sure that we're attempting to get some more feedback.
And that was one of the reasons why on the task force, we had 4 current or former MEC students to be able to provide some more information. Traditionally, we might have 1 or 2, but we were able to gather a few more for this process.
And I don't know if you want feedback on like what we like or what we don't like or anything.
I guess the feedback right now is mainly for you to look at the information, get thinking about it, provide some directions if there's anything else you would like to information wise before the September regular meeting. I believe that Mike is ready to take the recommendation of the task force and the names that we've kind of narrowed it and forward it to the board at that time. It would just be, is there something else process wise or discussion wise that the board would like to add or discuss?
So just a clarifying question on that. That means that we're going to get like the top 2 for each kind of section for us to.
Yeah, we have that now, and I can share that. We'll get it more formally, like in a board update and an actual situation page for the September 22nd meeting.
The goal would be to come out of the September meeting with names to put on 30-day review, and then to adopt it in the October meeting. So that's why we wanted to have a discussion tonight. Haley?
So my question was, how did you advertise it? How did we get this survey out there? And to who was it, directed towards? Because I feel like I understand it was very tricky, especially you said it was last year. So, the pandemic and everything, it's super hard. And I was just wondering how we advertise that.
Yeah, good question. So we primarily initiated to focus around, so the survey went to all MEC students, staff, and families. In the springtime, Principal Mosqueda put that in her weekly email update, also worked with her staff to provide time during the day for students while they were in school, when we came back to class in person, to fill out the survey. The survey was also on our traditional website and hot news and those kind of things for the community. Additionally, it was also presented to our 4 comprehensive high schools, because that's where the students feed into, to provide the 4 comprehensive high schools a resource for them to respond to the survey. The survey was open for a total of, I want to say 4 total weeks, partially in the spring, and then we did reopen it in the summer for our PACs to provide some more input. But it did go to all of the current MEC student families and students and staff.
Okay, and second question is it still open or is it now closed?
It has been closed. We had a window to gather the information in the spring, and then we reopened it the first week around in August, but we specifically targeted the link to go to our PACs. I will remind the board, it's your prerogative to add names, take off names. That is, your governing body is able to do that. We'll be able to do that for sure at the September regular session. This is the information that the task force has been able to gather to this point. Yes.
So just know, I think part of the, we didn't receive as much feedback because I think a lot of our families do not relate their students to Miller. And I think that's the problem because of the name, which is why the naming process has to happen. Because for these buildings, we want families to be able to identify the services at these for everybody and not just think that, oh, this is exclusive to other kids. So that's just me. I think the name should change, and I'd be interested in looking at what's, you know, been people's favorites. But I do think that if we really want to get more engagement from everybody and have it be more like a HSD thing for everyone, I think the name has to change.
So Yadira, as you look at, just to get your feedback on a couple of these, as you look at the top three names that are currently, so Oak Street Campus was the #1 vote getter between the top two categories, and then Miller Education Center, and then the third one was MEC West at David. Do any of those strike you in terms of, you know, where you would go with that? Or do you have your own idea? The Yadira Martinez School, yeah.
I will say, Mike, you may have stepped out for a minute, but for the task force for the top two names, I mean, this is the survey names, but the task force top two names were the Oak Street campus and the Options and Opportunities campus.
Thank you. Because it's more descriptive.
Two things, a very brief comment and then a very brief question. I'm more partial to Oak Street as a campus name because it feels more like the name of a location instead of trying to describe like a service more generally. I think that when I'm talking about a place that I'm going, I don't say like, I'm going to the Blanco Education Center. It feels a little bit trite. So those are just my own 2 cents as somebody who has strong opinions about lots of things. But my question just generally is, I know it's so surprising to people who've known me for years, but my question very quickly is just, where did these first name suggestions come from? I'm just curious what the process was to first generate them before we started narrowing it down.
Yeah, good question. So a combination of both. So the task force, when we initially met, we had, that task force had generated some of the names. Those names were then incorporated into the surveys that went out. And all of the surveys, the people who responded had the opportunity to add name suggestions. So that's how all the names were gathered as options.
Thanks.
Like for me, I actually kind of disagree, just because like for me, like I don't really know what Miller Education Center is about. And so like just hearing like, you know, Oak Street campus, I still don't really know what it's about. So like I think like sometimes like having like Options and Opportunity campus, you kind of get a feel like a little bit more of like what's it about and like what happens in there. Like I'm gonna do my own research and look into it too. But like I'm still kind of confused if like, is it its own school? Is it like a supplement? Like, or like what exactly is Miller Education Center? But yeah.
Part of our work ahead is a rebranding so that we can communicate all of that information to community and families about what this campus is. So, but first we need a name, and then we'll go out and do all the rebranding and sharing of information. I do have a suggestion that we remove anything that has Miller in our names to narrow down just what options we have for the next meeting to discuss, because I think everybody's in agreement that we want to go away from that name really. And maybe that will be helpful in having less options when we're discussing at our next meeting. And I do definitely have to still feel very strongly about just Oak Street because I feel like it's such a part of Hillsboro, just the area and the location. And it's just a very easy, everybody knows where that is most of the time, especially with like Maple Oak and you know the surrounding. So I just feel like
I have two comments to make. So, one, we should definitely change the name. I don't think Oak Street is my favorite, just because it's, you know, when I'm gonna tell somebody where I go, I don't want to be like, yeah, I go to Oak Street. I want to be like, oh, you know, I go to Hill High, I go to Century, Liberty, something that just kind of rolls off the tongue like that. And I feel like Oak Street just doesn't do that. And another thing I wanted to comment on is advertisement. So when we're trying to advertise to families of color, I think that the number one best way is either on paper or call them. Because I know my mom does not know how to use the internet. She's not going to look at an email. She doesn't know how to go to a link. And I know some students do, but like they also might be like, oh, whatever. Or they'll be like, oh, I'll do it later. And then we always forget. We always say we're going to do it later and we never do. Like, I don't know, we just do that. Or like, you know, some students are busy, they just don't. And, you know, parents don't have time to be, you know, just sitting there trying to figure out how to even like connect to the Wi-Fi, you know? Like, am I even on here correctly? So I think it's very important to just call, give them a paper. I don't know, something like that, something old fashioned like that, because they don't know about the internet.
Would it be helpful if, and we do have schools that are named after streets or vice versa. So if you look at Glencoe, you've got Imlay, you've got Lincoln Street. There's several of them. Would it be helpful to look at the top two options and opportunities campus, look at that, and then give you some ideas, maybe what would be named on that campus to bring back for consideration, or do you want to start with a blank slate next time?
I'm happy to build on the work that the task force and team have done thus far. So, I mean, let's bring forward Oak Street campus and Pathway Center, along with maybe one other one. Is there another? If someone's talking, I can't hear him, but I do see a hand up on the other
We're
side.
silently battling to determine who's going next. Okay, this is Lisa again. I just wanted to throw my 2 cents in. I agree. I think that we should stick with the work that we shouldn't start from scratch. That doesn't make sense. That's not cool. And I prefer Oak Street. I agree here. You're right. You're like, it's not on brand with the rolling off the tongue. That makes sense. But I feel like the Options and Opportunities Center has too much potential to get a negative connotation. And I don't like that, whereas Oak Street doesn't. So I think
I was just going to say that I feel like Kaylee's comment about paper communication, if we're trying to do outreach to families, especially families of color, ties into a little bit of what we've heard today from the Latinx pack, who I believe is one of the things that I wrote down. They were asking for like on paper communication that they could bring home about different like school topics and also about COVID information. I think that just might be something to like point out and carry on forward. Maybe not necessarily going back in this process, but something as we consider as we try and continue to reach out to families who have been underserved is to think about technological limitations and not always rely on like an emailed newsletter to try and get our stuff out. That seems like it might have been a limitation as part of this process. And it's something that I think has been brought up enough times today that we should consider it moving forward.
Haley?
I think my problem with Oak Street is the street part, because like you guys had mentioned Glencoe and Imlay, like those don't have like Glencoe Road, Imlay Street, like stuff like that to it. So like I'm not saying let's name it Oak, but maybe something like not involving street or like road. When you think about like Lincoln Street or Glencoe High School or everything else, it seems like Oak Street is a natural choice for a longer name that would probably not, even with our conscious doing, would probably end up being shortened Oak, which I think solves a little bit of the problem of rolling off the tongue. And I don't think that, what is the other option? The Opportunity Center, I think that is worse for the rolling off the tongue problem. So I think that's just something we should consider. And then I also maybe think that we should like sit on it a little as we're going into the next.
Yeah, we're not
meeting and all have
deciding
some time
tonight.
to think about it.
We're not deciding tonight. Dale, do you want to make a comment and I can wrap us up? That'd be good. Yep, agreed. We will bring some models back for you to consider, and then you can tweak them as you see fit. Does that work for everybody? All right.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, I don't know that the problem with 64 responses or whatever is outreach, unless that there's no geographic community tied to this site. That, I mean, sure, we can always do better with outreach, but I think that the limited survey response is more likely indicative of the fact that it doesn't represent a geographical community where people are very concerned about the building name next door to them. So, all right, our next item is an action item. And Jordan, I think you're going to give us some background information first.
Yes, this first item is the purchase using bond dollars of a new phone system for the entire district. We started this process quite a while ago, pre-pandemic, and we did a request for information with a number of district requests for new phone system, as long as allowing vendors to propose additional things that they see other school districts doing with phone systems and so forth. After reviewing those, we had about 14 responses, actually. We had a good response on that, and chose Mitel as probably our best offering for moving forward. And so then we had multiple Mitel vendors request to submit proposals for that, and this is moving that forward to purchase that new phone system from Structured Communication Systems, and again, using bond dollars.
All right, so doing them one at a time. The first one, would anybody like to make a motion?
I move that the Board of Directors acknowledge the notice of intent to purchase by use of a cooperative purchase agreement under the authority of the State of Oregon, ORS 279A215, permissive cooperative procurement.
I second. Yadira seconds.
All right, having heard a motion from Erica and a second from Yadira, do we have any discussion? I can't see, Mike, let me know.
No.
All right, so the motion is to move that the board of directors acknowledge the notice of intent to purchase by use of a cooperative purchasing agreement under the authority of the State of Oregon, ORS 279A.215, permissive cooperative procurements, has been made by Erica and seconded by Yadira. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? Motion carries. All right, Jordan, you have another one?
Yes, the second one is our yearly Microsoft licensing purchase, again off a consortium purchase through this one through OETC. And this gives us all of our licensing that covers both our email systems, security systems, account setup, and both for student and staff accounts. And again, this is yearly purchase.
All right, having heard that, does anybody like to make a motion?
I will second this time.
All right, I didn't hear who made the motion, but sounds like somebody did.
Nancy made the motion and Lisa.
Gotcha. All right, and Lisa second. All right, so we have a motion on the floor and a second, but is there any discussion?
I did just have a question about how we wrote both of the motions are exactly written the same, I think. Was there a reason why we don't have it like stipulate which one's for what? But it doesn't differentiate what we're buying.
Is that Rose answering?
Yeah, it was Rose. I was just asking that it doesn't differentiate the first motion from the second motion. So it doesn't actually say which one's for which items.
You know, we can do that in the future.
Yeah.
Add in what exactly.
I was just thinking like when we write down our notes and stuff, if there were to be a difference in the outcome of the vote, how would you know which one was for?
We can do that.
Okay.
And I'd agree that we don't have numbers in here. We don't really know. I mean, we've discussed it, and the minutes could show, and the video would show that what we're talking about. But yeah, with identical language, it can be very confusing if you're just summarizing from a legal perspective.
We can adjust that moving forward.
Any further discussion? All right, it's been moved by Nancy and seconded by Lisa that the Board of Directors acknowledge the notice of intent to purchase by use of a cooperative purchasing agreement under the authority of the state of Oregon, ORS 279A.215, permissive cooperative procurements. All in favor signify by saying aye. I didn't hear anybody, but all right. Anybody opposed? Feels like it passed. I don't know. Somebody give me a thumbs up.
No
All right.
opposition.
You're good.
The motion passes. All right. Discussion time. We're getting close to wrapping up, and it's only 4:02 a.m. Student reps, you want to figure out who would like to go first?
Just wanted to say some like updates, well, like from a student perspective about like the whole back to school situation. First off, the drinking policy is really confusing. You're informed at Glencoe that we couldn't drink in the classrooms, but then all of a sudden we last minute got an email like teachers did, and all of a sudden we can. And it's just really confusing. So I don't really know what's going on for that. And like, you know, our generation is more dehydrated than ever. Like we already were, but full tide. And then I think I remember in the last board meeting, there were some parents that were talking about like mental health and regarding masks. I personally don't think that's the case. I think that a lot of kids, they're just happy to be back in person. And I think that overall overrides like the whole mask situation. I don't think that the masks have imposed a serious barrier towards of social like interactions. And I think I was gonna say something and I forgot. Both side. The long lunch lines, Dale talked about that. Another roll tide. There's because of like the free lunches now, I think we have more students getting school lunch, which I think is a good thing. But I think that also like it's causing some issues as well. And like there's like it's really crowded, really crowded. And some kids don't get their lunch at the end of the lunch, especially like on the first day. And then the parking lot is a mess, but we already know that. Passing periods feels like we're all just like a bunch of fish crammed together, but I'm sure you guys would know that too. For the Chamber of Commerce, for the whole internship situation, that's really confusing. And I think like, because I'm in the Civics and Community Service CCP at Glencoe, that's kind of new. We are kind of iffy right now about the whole internship, and we don't know if we're going to be able to get those because of like, yeah. So I just want to address that. And then for the first day of school, a lot of kids were lost, and I think a lot of kids still are. And I think maybe that's like our problem, but like we didn't have like any students except for like me and like two other kids that were helping kids out, finding their classes. So that was really hard, and I think a lot of it was emotional burden for a lot of our freshmen, sophomores, and new juniors that are coming in from other school districts. Homecoming is really confusing right now as well. I don't think it's the dance isn't happening, but the game's allowed, right? And then yeah, that's a big. And then this is a Glencoe specific thing, and I don't think it's in the scope of the district's powers, but there's a lot of students are frustrated that German, AP Lit, AP Physics, AP Gov, AP Econ, and welding were all cut, and that affected a lot of us. Yeah, I think those are the main ones. Good times.
Since Michelle did, I think, a fairly good job running down an itemized list of some of the stuff that's been popping up, I'm going to take a more like grand overview of how things have been going. I just want to say, firstly, that I'm incredibly glad that we get to be back at school. I've seen people who I haven't really talked to in like a year and a third now, and it's been absolutely incredible to be able to have that human connection. I think we were all missing it. I want to say how grateful I am that the board is working to make sure that students can be back in school all time, all the day. It has made a world of difference for me so far, and I've only been in school for what, 4 days now? Nope, today was a full day too. There we go. Yes, it's a Tuesday. Sorry. I think that one thing that I'd like to just bring to the attention when I have a stage to say this like I do right now is communication with students, communication about a thing that I've been hearing from some people who are frustrated with policies of like having to go into the hallway to like eat and etc. If there could be a little bit more communication to students about why certain decisions are being made, I think that if students understand the rationale for things, they're more likely to comply easily. I think that just generally, if we can try and work on making sure that everyone's aware of what's happening, it's been a little bit difficult to follow throughout the school day, but to look at some more of the positives, I know that I'm able to be involved with the theater program again this year, and I know that people are incredibly grateful for the opportunity to be back in the classroom, to talk to their peers and friends, to make connections, to do hands-on activities, to actually be able to learn and ask your questions in real time. And despite, I think, some of our struggles at the start of the year, it's made a world of difference to everyone I've been able to talk to at school to be back. And I think we're all looking forward to the year ahead and are hopeful that we'll be able to get back to as much of normal as is humanly possible. So thank you.
Okay, it's my turn. Thank you to you guys. So that was Glencoe. And for Hill High, I think that school going back, the number one thing I have heard from seniors is I'm exhausted. I'm tired. Like going back to all day, every day has been very draining for so many students. And I know a lot of them like it, but it's just been a little bit tough. I do like how teachers took the time to really give us a break and not give us homework yet. A lot of them did do that. Lunches are crazy. I'm like, I kind of want pizza today, and then I see the line like wrapping around, and I'm like, never mind. The special will do. So the lines are really long now. I don't know if there's something that we can do about it, and it sounds like it's not just a Hill High problem; it's a problem in other schools. And parking. Parking is the first day I almost saw 3 car accidents. Luckily, everybody was okay. Now they have admin like out there directing traffic. The only issue is that the student section, there's nobody directing us. And I got in my car at 3:35 and I left the school like at 4. So you cannot leave that place ever. Like it's really hard to get out. And I know that now like the parent section, like the drop off pickup area is a lot better now, because the first day parents were stopping where everybody was trying to get out.
So that's a lot better, but I think maybe there could be something done about the student section as well. And I just think that overall, it's going to be a good year. I think it's going to be a good year. I'm very excited. One thing is though, that when we have like college and career committees and everything, I think that we should be a lot more committed to that, because I know like this year, I have to take 2 classes in one period because I can't drop any of my classes, and nor do I want to. But it's very hard because I'm full IB, and that's a pathway in itself. But I'm also an avid, and I'm also in student government, and I'm also dual language. So that all does not fit into my schedule. And I think that starting freshman year, it's very important to really, have students pick their pathway and really try our best and our hardest to really put them in those classes. I have heard so many times like, oh, I'm what they call a special case. I'm supposed to be doing, at this point, a vet 2. And right now I'm actually just taking vet 1 because I never got the option to go into vet 2 in previous years. And my initial pathway was human resources, but I never got in the law. I never got these classes that I needed to go into that pathway. So my second pathway was full IB. And I think that we really have to be a little bit more strict on that, especially if that is something that we are saying, like, HSD, we're focusing on college and career, and, we have committees, we have all these things, and all you hear around school is college and career centers, take this pathway, you can get dual credit, this and that, like help to get into college, but we're not being strict enough on it when it comes to classes. Like I had automotive my freshman year. That has nothing to do with human resources. So I think that that's my number one thing. And I'm just so excited. I really want to do the coffee chat. That committee sounds super fun. That is all.
All right, thank you guys. Mike, you are up.
Yeah, a couple things. First of all, for the student reps, so many of those things that you mentioned, you should take up with your high school principal. They're so specific that we're not going to be able to address those here. So please feel empowered to do that. Not as a student rep to the board, but just as a student who has some questions about lunches or halls or traffic or prom. Really take those up with one of the administrators. I do want to say things like pathways, that's a broader issue. That's super helpful. That's the kind of information that we want. So it's super helpful there. A couple things I want to alert the board to, and I kind of mentioned it before. The first one is we're going to likely have an issue with transportation down the road. And I'm just going to keep saying that because when it happens, we're all going to have to be great communicators on it. There is likely going to come a point where we will have a shortage of bus drivers, and we're going to have to be really creative with the routes that we run, with the way that we problem solve around that. Like I was saying before, we have 10 ideas on this list of things we brainstormed. We're starting to look into all of those in order to hopefully be prepared for when that occurs. But that is an issue that is likely going to happen. We know it's already happening in other districts, and they're already having to find workarounds. And I think some of that, a lot of our response is going to have to be just setting priorities and hitting those top priorities first, and then getting creative with everything else that we can't fill at the time. The other issue that's interesting is that we have supply chain issues with our nutrition services food. Us getting the food that we typically order used to never be a problem. And now with supply chain issues, that is a problem. Nate, who heads nutrition services for us, believes that is likely at least a 6-month problem that is coming. And so some of the lunch packages may be interesting. I mean, it may be pizza and green beans one day. I mean, who knows? It'll still fit the nutritional standards, but it won't come in your typical packing as we get further into this issue. We're in the process of doing things like Casey and his team, they've already got one refrigerated Conex box, and they're looking for another so that we can stockpile food and have it at the ready. but that's going to be an issue as well. So I know that school lunches are a popular thing to be upset about. It's going to get more interesting. Let's just put it that way. And a shortage of workers. Yeah. Yeah. Nutrition services staff, custodial staff, bus drivers, all going to be challenged. With that, the thing I'm most excited about this year is not just seeing you all in person, but just the fact that we have all the kids back every day. Going out to schools and seeing that, despite some of the first week issues that we're dealing with, it's just been awesome.
Do you mind if we go to Nancy, Mark, just for microphone passing?
Oh, sure. Okay.
So one of the things I wanted to ask, and I'm asking Beth to be, I need you to be intentional and thoughtful. That's what I'm asking for. There are two shortages that we know we're having. Potential teacher, but we know the transportation issue is coming. Let's don't wait to tell people. Let's tell them now. I really want us to tell people and prepare them now. If we don't tell them this is coming, they will think we're hiding it. We're not hiding. We're discussing, we're planning, we're problem solving, but I really feel like we need to let the district know that we see this as a crisis and it's coming. Come October, we're gonna have a problem. And I just want everybody to be thoughtful about it and intentional about how we communicate it, but that we shouldn't hide it. That's my issue. I just don't want this group being accused of not handling our responsibility. And we are in fact handling the responsibility in a wonderful way. But if the community doesn't know what we're facing, I think that's a problem. So I'm just asking for some intentional effort to make sure that we communicate this looming crisis to our community ASAP. And that's all. And Mark, I love the background behind you, dude.
It's board member time, so.
Yeah, whomever's next up in the microphone order.
So I was just gonna, so hearing just some of the discussions, I'm thinking about if there's ways of having, I don't know if we already have them, but of maps of our campuses, especially like thinking about students that are new to kind of or help them look at a map and like orient themselves, or even as parents, if you haven't had a chance to visit the school, you could see a map of the school and maybe that'll be helpful. And just more, I would just say more signage. I know that there's the problem with the flow of traffic and all that that's becoming an issue. But even just more signage, I do feel like some people don't know the rules, especially if you're a new parent doing drop off and pickup. You don't know the rules sometimes, and there's really sometimes not somebody monitoring. But if there's signage about, this is not a drop off area, keep going that way, that might be helpful on there. And then lastly, I was just thinking, especially about our problem solving and how we're going to do that regarding, I think I mentioned about transportation, but like with the nutritional services, is there a way of even having like cold lunches or fridges where kids can just grab and go versus having to wait in line? Now that everybody's getting it for free, do we need to be having a count anymore? So just a question and also suggest. And I am really, really excited that we're back. I definitely feel what you girls have mentioned about the exhaustion, and I have a senior this year who this is every day, and I get to hear all about all this, but also just how tired it is, and we forget how much energy it takes to be around people, and I know that that's definitely something we've got to get back used to. We didn't even know how taxing it was until we didn't have it. So thanks.
Who's next up at the mic?
I'll go next. Yeah, I do think that getting ahead of things that we know are coming, like the transportation issue, nutrition services. So letting parents know that ahead of time. Maybe some would prefer to pack their own lunch at home if they know that that's going to be a problem, or and then thinking outside of the box. Is there like locations near the school where we can have staff kind of walk groups of kids over, where kids can like be dropped off and then walked over, something to help, with traffic that's going on. So just, outside the box thinking, and definitely letting parents know ahead of time before we're there, if we know that that's where we're going to be at. My daughter started school last week, 2nd grade. She loves it. She loves her teacher. She loves being back in the classroom. Doesn't care about wearing a mask. She's perfectly happy with it. And I actually drove by while she was outside in recess, and they're wearing their masks outside too. And those kids seem to be running around and having a good time, so she said that she can't hug people. So, because she's a big time, she loves hugging everybody. So we've kind of had to like put some boundaries up. So, but other than that, she's just super happy to be there. I'm glad that she's there, but she's her normal self again.
So by my count, it's Lisa, Monique, and then me, right? Or what? Monique, then Lisa, and then me.
Monique is passed.
Oh, okay.
Lisa doesn't believe in passing. I'm just kidding.
Well, I'm aware.
I passed lots of times, Monique. I'm just kidding. Yeah, we're all super exhausted. Just, your teachers are like 3 times more exhausted, and you should bring them coffee and spread the word, just as a PSA. Okay. Oh my gosh, it's so great to be back and building with kids. And my kids are in 3rd and 6th grade, and they are digging it. They're so excited. They do not want to see our faces and be near us at all when they can be near cool people who are in 3rd and 6th grade. And they just think they are the coolest. They are having the best time. And it sounds like all of their friends are having just the best time. And just like Yadira said, like, it's like seeing their real selves again. And they were kind of eclipsed for quite a while, for like this last year or so. So it's been just amazing. And as always, we can't say enough good things about the amazing staff, teachers. And so great and kind and patient, understanding, and they are saints. The elementary teachers are who I'm talking about, but I'm sure the secondary teachers are amazing too. But oh my gosh. And I can't imagine like having to wrangle 25 kids who all want to hug each other. Like, oh my gosh, we should give them all the coffee. So they're just amazing, and the kids are wonderful. And I'm really hopeful that we'll get to keep on this trajectory for the rest of the school year. So if we can just all keep wearing our masks, and if we haven't been vaccinated, getting vaccinated, because don't be a baby, and it's fine, and just go do it right now. And really excited about a booster soon for those of us who have been vaccinated. So that'll be great. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing you all at the end of the month. Go ahead, Mark.
All right. Just a quick question, Mike. Is the transportation, we've always had transportation issues. Is this likely worse than when we had to cancel trips and Beth had to do a video a couple of years ago, or about the same?
Yes, there are more videos in Beth's future, for sure. The reason is because we're so close to the edge right now. Once the vaccination requirement kicks in, we don't know how many people are going to be impacted by that. So yes, I think it will be worse than it has been before. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, sounds like Beth will be making some more videos. I am so glad to hear the heartwarming stories of all of our students who are our parents who have students who are back, and our student representatives who are back. Thank you for sharing the stories of your buildings, and I wish I were there in a lot of ways. So I want to thank you all for your patience and grace with me being so far away yet participating. 3 years ago when we planned this trip for our 25th anniversary, we did not expect COVID or that I might be the board chair. So I really did not want to miss my very first meeting of the school year. So I appreciate you all having patience and putting up with a little bit of confusion that this caused. And I'd also like to thank and congratulate the communication and technology staff for putting this all together. We had, I think everybody from the consulting firm was in California or Seattle probably, and Jordan was able to participate remotely. So I think we've learned integrating in person and virtual is something we're just going to have to do in the future. And I commend our technology team for doing so. That said, 4:25 a.m. We're all done. Have a good night. This meeting is adjourned. I'll see you guys at the end of the month in person.